Hey guys, tonight we're slipping into a story soaked with salt water, rum and cold bones. You ever wonder how pirates, yes, the eye-patched, sword-swinging legends of the sea, managed to get even a wink of sleep on their medieval ships without freezing to death? Because here's the truth. Pirate ships were not cosy. They were floating wooden coffins soaked with brine and bad decisions. You probably won't survive this night if you try to picture it too literally. But don't worry, we're not here to survive, we're here to imagine. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. No pressure. Also, I'd love to know, where are you watching from tonight, and what time is it where you are? Drop your city and time in the comments below. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. It's late by pirate standards anyway. Maybe somewhere past midnight, or maybe just before dawn. Time's slippery at sea. You're on the deck of a medieval pirate ship, maybe somewhere around the 15th or early 16th century. The moon hangs overhead like a tarnished coin, cold and full and watching. The ship rocks gently beneath you. Well, gentle if the waves are being kind. The hull creaks with every shift. The ropes groan, and beneath your boots the sea breathes a low, wet growl. Your clothes are damp, of course. Everything is damp. The air smells like tar, mildew, sweat, and something worse you stopped identifying 2 weeks ago. You've been on this ship too long. The wind slides through your sleeves like a knife, sharp and uncaring, and all you want is to lie down. Just somewhere warm, somewhere quiet, somewhere that doesn't reek of fish guts and mouldy biscuit crumbs. Too bad that's not an option. Because on this ship you don't have a bed. No one does, not even the captain, unless you count a mouldy hammock and a chest for a pillow. You've been assigned to the lower deck, somewhere between the livestock pen and the cannon bay, and let's just say it's not exactly the Ritz. You share your room with 20 other guys, 2 rats, and a barrel of pickled herring that leaks something suspicious. The floor is slick with seawater, the walls sweat salt, and somewhere in the corner, someone's boots have started to rot. But right now, you're still above deck. The stars are out, the night's cruel, and you know what's coming next. Sleep. Or some diluted version of it. The idea of falling asleep in the open air sounds dreamy in theory. But there's a problem. That dreamy night air. It's cold. Not put on a sweater. Cold. It's bite through your bones and chill your teeth. Cold. The wind picks up and slices through your clothing like paper. Your fingers are already stiff, and your toes. You stopped feeling them an hour ago. Still, you've seen worse. You remember that time north of Iceland, where the sea froze in patches and you woke up with your beard stuck to the deck, or when a storm snapped the main mast and everyone had to bail out seawater for 6 hours straight before collapsing into puddles. So yeah, this is bearable. Sort of. One of the other crewmates walks past, muttering about hammocks and ghosts. You don't ask. People get weird at night on the sea. The brain gets soft when it's starved of sleep. And pirates, they aren't exactly known for their mental hygiene. You glance toward the forecastle. Technically, you're not supposed to sleep up there, but you've done it before. There's a little nook behind the capstan where, if you curl up just right, the wind won't hit you as hard. It's cramped, it smells like oil, and once you found a spider the size of a crab there. But it's quiet. That's rare. Still, you hesitate. You know the rules. Someone's always on watch, and if the quartermaster catches you napping in the wrong spot, you'll lose your next food ration, which means no hardtack tomorrow. Not that you like hardtack, it's like chewing a brick, but it's better than hunger. You could go below deck, but that means squeezing into the sleeping quarters, or rather, the not sleeping quarters. There's barely room to lie flat and the hammocks are full. If you're lucky, you'll find a plank to lie on. If you're really lucky, it won't have someone else's vomit on it. So you hover there a moment, debating. The sea breathes its salty breath, the ship groans like it's dreaming, and finally you decide, screw it. You're tired enough to risk it. You tiptoe to your secret spot near the capstan. It's darker here and the wind doesn't bite as much. You pull your coat tighter, if you even want to call it that, and sit. The wood is damp. You shift, get a splinter, curse softly, and finally tuck your arms inside your shirt for warmth. Sleep doesn't come easy. It's not like lying in bed at home. It's more like letting your brain shut off while your body stays on high alert. You're half awake the whole time, ears tuned to creaks and footsteps, or the shout of man overboard that no one ever wants to hear at night. But slowly your mind starts to drift. You think about the land, about warm fires, about dry socks. You think about things you haven't seen in months. Trees, birds, bread that doesn't crumble into powder. Maybe if you're lucky you'll dream of them. Somewhere behind you someone coughs, then snores, then mutters something about treasure and chickens. You try to ignore it. You pull your knees to your chest and try to steal an hour or two of rest before the next watch bell rings. And just as you're finally dozing off, a rat scurries over your foot. Welcome to pirate life. You wake with your face pressed against cold, splintered wood, your mouth dry and tasting faintly of salt and regret. Somewhere nearby, a rooster crows. Wait, no. That's just Big Tom snoring with a kind of wet gargle that sounds disturbingly like poultry. The sky's still dark, just flirting with the first hints of dawn, and your back is stiff like someone replaced your spine with a broken broom handle. Welcome to another glorious morning aboard a medieval pirate ship. Before you even move, your body gives you the usual warning signs. Your neck's been bent at a criminal angle, one foot is entirely asleep, and your hip has fused with a knot in the deck. But what's worse is the damp. It's everywhere. Soaks into everything. You slept in it, breathed it, probably drooled a little of it, and now it's like your entire skeleton is wrapped in wet cloth. That's what happens when you try to sleep outside in the sea wind, on a boat designed more for staying afloat than for creature comforts. Still, it could be worse. You could be sleeping inside. You force yourself upright, rubbing your hands together to get the blood moving. As the deck starts to come alive with the morning shift, you cast your eyes over the ship, your temporary bobbing prison. You're not on a sleek fantasy frigate. You're aboard something far more practical, a modified cog or caravel depending on where you're sailing and who built the ship. Either way, it's a medieval workhorse. Thick hull, single deck, low ceiling, just enough room for cargo, cannons, livestock, and a bunch of disgruntled sea bandits trying not to die of exposure. The ship creaks and shudders with each gentle swell. She's built from oak, pine, whatever sturdy wood the builders could get their hands on. The planks are swollen with moisture, the tar between them perpetually sticky, and the whole thing smells faintly of mouldy rope and dreams deferred. She's no beauty queen, but she floats, and that's enough. You start walking the deck slowly, stiff-legged and sore. Your eyes land on the forecastle first, that raised section at the bow of the ship. It's where a few men are assigned to sleep, especially if they pull higher rank or manage the sails. There's a little shelter up there, built from wood and patched sailcloth. Don't get too excited. It leaks when it rains, and the wind screams through it like a banshee in heat, but it's technically out of the open air. Then there's the main deck, your usual stomping ground. Open to the elements, exposed to sea spray, and home to whatever unfortunate soul got stuck with night watch duty. It's where fights break out. Meals are choked down and desperate naps are stolen behind barrels. But when it comes to sleeping arrangements, this is low-tier real estate. Below deck, things get more interesting. You descend the short, narrow steps that lead into the guts of the ship. The air immediately shifts, heavier, mustier, like someone trapped bad breath and sadness in a barrel and popped the lid. It's darker down here too. There's just enough lantern light to make out the low beams and hanging ropes. You duck automatically. Everyone learns that lesson quickly. This is the lower deck, the medieval equivalent of a budget hostel shared with 50 violent strangers. It's where the crew sleeps, if you can call it sleep. The space is broken up into sections, usually based on function: gun deck, storage, sleeping quarters, animal pens. And in between all that, people just sort of find places to lie down. Someone might be curled up under a cannon, someone else might be sleeping on a grain sack, someone's snoring in the corner next to a coop of angry chickens. It's chaos, but functional chaos. The architecture doesn't help. The ceiling's low, sometimes just 4 or 5 feet, which means taller crewmen spend their days hunching like sad goblins. Support beams jut out like rude elbows, and every surface is splintered, sticky, or slick. The floor slopes slightly with the hull, so if you drop something, it rolls into darkness and vanishes forever. There's no such thing as insulation. Cold air seeps through the hull like a ghost with chilly hands, and in winter, frost forms on the inside of the beams. You glance at the hammocks. If you're lucky, you might get one. These were introduced by the indigenous Taino people of the Caribbean, and pirates, being opportunistic thieves with an eye for comfort, quickly adopted them. Hammocks don't touch the wet, rat-infested floor. They sway with the ship's motion, less seasickness, and they're slightly less horrible than sleeping on a wet plank. But there are only so many to go around. and the best spots, near the centre of the ship, away from the leaks, are claimed fast and often violently, so most people sleep wherever they can. There's a dark corner near the powder kegs where someone's tried to build a nest of sailcloth. Another guy's wrapped himself in a fishing net, possibly for warmth, or possibly as a weird lifestyle choice. Someone else has jammed themselves between two barrels and is using a chicken as a pillow. Resourceful, sure. Sanitary? Absolutely not. And here's the real kicker, there's no such thing as personal space here. You are, at all times, no more than 6 inches away from someone else's breath, feet, snoring mouth, or bodily fluid. It's a miracle anyone sleeps at all. You crouch near the floor, brush away some straw, and press your hand to the wood. Cold. Of course it is. The sea's just inches below, separated by nothing more than a few planks and some aging tar. No wonder the cold sinks in so easily. At night, when the temperature drops, the whole ship becomes a damp freezer box. Pirates would sleep curled into themselves, layered in whatever clothing they hadn't pawned, stolen, or soaked. There were no blankets unless you made your own, or stole one. You stand up, head brushing the low ceiling, and look around. The bones of the ship tell a story of survival, not comfort. Pirates weren't out here for luxury. They endured, they adapted, they curled into corners, they layered their clothes, they spooned crewmates, and sometimes they just shivered through the night and hoped they'd be alive to complain about it in the morning. And above all else, they never let themselves get too comfortable. Comfort meant vulnerability. Comfort meant you might let your guard down. And on a ship full of thieves, cutthroats, and glory chasers, that was the surest way to wind up overboard. You head back above deck, if only to breathe something that doesn't smell like stale onions and foot fungus. The sun's creeping up now, just barely, a muted orange glow slicing across the jagged horizon. The sky's a bruise of purples and greys, and the sea is quiet, almost respectfully so. Mornings on a pirate ship have their own rhythm, a tired grumble of limbs unfolding, boots thudding on wood, someone already cursing, and someone else already looking for breakfast that doesn't involve maggots. It's not exactly serene, but it's honest, and that counts for something. But now that you've had a crash course in how tight and miserable the sleeping quarters are, let's talk about the real enemy, cold. And not just any cold, this is sea cold, deep, unrelenting, bone-sinking cold. You don't really understand it until you've lived it. It's not just the temperature, it's the way the damp air slides under your skin, the way your clothes never really dry, and the way your breath hangs around your face like a lazy ghost. You duck under a slack sail and settle near a coil of rope, watching your fingers tremble as you try to warm them against your sides. You're wearing all your layers, your shirt, your vest, your coat. But it doesn't help. The fabric's soaked from yesterday's squall. Everything's always soaked. Even when it doesn't rain, the air itself feels like wet fabric against your skin. The wood under your feet? Always slick. Your hammock rope? Slick. Your blanket, if you're lucky enough to have one? You guessed it, slick. That's because ships in this era were little more than floating boxes sealed with pitch, designed to stay on the water, not to keep the water out. Moisture finds every crack. It rises from the sea below, seeps through the boards, drips from the beams, and condenses along the hull. Imagine trying to sleep in a sponge with sails. That's the vibe. And condensation, that's the real devil here. You might think sleeping below deck would be warmer, and maybe for a short while it is. The air's a little more still, body heat builds up, and the wood doesn't freeze your back the way the deck does. But wait a few hours, and that same still air becomes a damp trap. Water droplets form on the beams overhead and fall onto your face as you sleep. They soak into the blankets, into your clothes, into your hair. You wake up feeling like you were lightly poached in your own sweat. A cosy, salty stew of discomfort. Some of the smarter pirates try to fight back with makeshift tarps or old sailcloths strung above their hammocks, little drip shields to keep their faces dry. Others shove dry straw into their coats for insulation, which works until it gets infested with lice. And a few just sleep sitting up, backs against barrels, arms crossed tight over their chests, daring the cold to do its worst. But here's the twist. Your own body turns against you. When it's cold and you're stuck in wet clothes, your body starts to shut things down. Fingers and toes first, then your nose, then your sense of humour. And eventually the chill wraps around your spine and starts whispering things like, maybe if you just lie still a little longer, it won't feel so bad. You remember hearing about one poor soul, old Eric, a guy who'd been with the crew longer than anyone could remember, who tried to sleep below deck during a sudden cold snap. It wasn't even the Arctic, just a bad night off the coast of Brittany. He curled up in the corner with two thin blankets, muttered something about seeing his mother in the moonlight, and by morning he was stiff as the mizzenmast. Frost on his beard, eyes open, gone. They gave him a sea burial wrapped in sailcloth and a few slurred words of half-hearted prayer. No one ever said it out loud, but everyone was thinking the same thing. It could have been me. So you learn. You learn to spot the signs of cold creeping in. You learn not to sit too long, not to let your body go still, not to trust the deceptive warmth of a damp blanket. You keep moving. You huddle when you can. You joke, you curse, you drink. Anything to stay alive a little longer. It's not just physical either. The cold messes with your mind. It makes you irritable, short-tempered. Every crewmate becomes a potential enemy when you're sleep-deprived and freezing. You argue over whose boots are drier. You accuse someone of stealing your sock singular. You start to think about jumping overboard just to feel something different. Then there's the cough, the deep, chest-rattling cough that creeps through the crew like a plague in a closed room. Nobody's surprised when someone develops a fever. You don't even get real doctors out here. Just the ship's surgeon, who's more familiar with rum than anatomy and has a knife that's suspiciously rust-coloured. And here's the ironic part. Some of the coldest places weren't the Arctic or the North Atlantic. Sometimes, even in more temperate zones like the English Channel or off the coast of Portugal, the cold still found a way to gnaw through layers. It didn't have to be freezing by the numbers, it just had to be wet, unrelenting and long-lasting. Scholars debate whether some pirate crews had better survival rates simply because they stuck to warmer waters. The Caribbean pirates? Sure, they had to deal with heat stroke and hurricanes, but at least they weren't shivering in their own sweat every night. Then again, tropical climates came with their own curses. Mosquitoes, rotting food, sweltering holds, but cold wasn't one of them. Some historians think the shift to warmer seas wasn't just about treasure and trade routes, it was about survival, about finally getting some sleep without the looming threat of frostbite. But you're not that lucky. You're still on this creaky tub of misery in a climate that seems to want you dead. The crew's stirring now. Someone dumps a bucket over the side. Someone else stretches and groans. The cook bangs a ladle against a pot full of mystery stew. It's time to start the day, which mostly means waiting to sleep again, and praying the cold doesn't beat you to it. You rub your hands together one last time, breathe into your fingers and steel yourself. Because out here, warmth isn't a right, it's a battle. And it starts again every night. By now, you've probably figured out that a pirate's life wasn't all gold coins and sea shanties. Sure, there were moments of excitement, boarding a merchant ship, finding a hidden cache of rum, outrunning the navy, but most of the time, it was just discomfort, laced with boredom and the slow, creeping chill of being perpetually damp. So when it comes to sleep, actual, restorative sleep, you start to appreciate even the smallest things, like a dry spot, or a hammock that doesn't reek of fermented onions, or a moment when the ship isn't trying to throw you overboard. You spot one of those rare blessings strung up between two thick wooden beams below deck. A hammock, a real one, sagging slightly in the middle, frayed at the edges, but still there, still swinging softly with the ship's motion. And you think, now that's luxury. The thing is, hammocks weren't just a convenient place to lie down. They were a brilliant bit of borrowed technology. Pirates didn't invent them. In fact, they got the idea from the Tainos, the indigenous people of the Caribbean. Long before European sailors ever set foot on those tropical shores, the Tainos were already sleeping off the ground, swaying gently in the breeze, bug-free and smug. When pirates saw these magical floating beds, they took notes. And then, of course, they took the hammocks. The genius of a hammock at sea can't be overstated. For one, it gets you off the floor, and that's a win all by itself. No more lying in stagnant bilge water or rolling around with half-rotten onions and wayward poultry. Up in a hammock you avoid the rats, creatures bold enough to chew through boots, shirts, and even earlobes if you're unlucky. You also avoid the worst of the condensation that pools on the deck overnight. And perhaps most importantly, you move with the ship's sway. See, ships pitch and roll, constantly. Sleeping on a hard surface means you're always being jostled, sliding this way then that. waking up every time your shoulder bangs into a barrel or your head collides with someone else's foot. But hammocks, they absorb the motion, they rock with the rhythm. It's almost peaceful once you get used to the creaking. You step closer to the empty hammock and give it a gentle push. It swings slightly, a lazy arc. Tempting. It doesn't belong to you, of course. Nothing does out here, really. But there's a pirate's rule when it comes to sleep. Possession is 9/10 of the law. If it's empty, it's fair game, until the rightful sleeper returns and kicks you out, hopefully without a knife. You've only slept in a hammock a few times, but you remember every moment of it. The first time you thought you were going to fall out. You lay there like a plank, arms at your sides, afraid to move. But eventually the fear faded and you allowed yourself to curl up. It wasn't soft. None of the cloth on this ship is soft, but it was suspended. Off the floor, away from the stink, away from the gnawing damp of the planks. It almost felt like floating. You remember the sound of the ship creaking all around you, the low murmurs of the crew, the occasional thud from above deck, and for once, you slept through the night. Well, most of it. You still woke up to someone shouting, "Where the hell's my hammock?" and had to pretend you were sleepwalking, but still, worth it. There's a pirate nearby now, stretched out in another hammock, his mouth open in a slack snoring O. You can see the way the cloth moulds to his shape, the way his boots dangle over one side. One arm droops lazily down, fingers twitching like he's chasing something in a dream. Maybe gold, maybe a warm meal, maybe just a pair of dry socks. Hammocks weren't perfect, of course. They were prone to mildew, the ropes frayed. Sometimes the knots failed, and you'd find yourself on the floor mid-snooze, tangled in your own bedding like a poorly netted fish. But compared to the alternative, planks, barrels, damp straw, they were a revolution. Some captains encouraged their use. They knew the benefits. A better rested crew was less likely to stab each other, less likely to botch a boarding, less likely to die of exposure. Others didn't care. "Sleep on your feet if you have to," they'd bark. "Just don't snore near the powder." There's even a bit of folklore surrounding hammocks. Some pirates believed that sleeping in one kept the devil from snatching your soul in the night, that since you were suspended between earth, or ship, and sky, you weren't quite here enough for him to grab. Others said it helped keep dreams from sinking too deep. They'd wake up remembering strange fragments, fish with human eyes, storms that whispered names, treasure chests that opened into darkness. Historians still argue about whether hammocks were standard issue or luxury. Some records suggest entire crews had them, slung shoulder to shoulder in long rows. Others show only the officers or favoured crew got them, while the rest of the poor sods were left to sprawl in damp misery. It probably varied ship to ship. Pirate democracy wasn't exactly consistent. One day you could be quartermaster, the next shark food. But the thing about hammocks, the reason they caught on, especially among those who spent months at sea, is that they were portable. You could roll them up, sling them over your back, and string them up anywhere 2 hooks or beams would hold. In a pinch, even a pair of trees on shore would do. And after sleeping in one for a few nights, you could never quite go back to the floor without a grumble. You look up now, scanning the low beams above you, imagining which knots you'd tie, which hooks you'd trust. You know the rigging, you know the balance. If you ever manage to steal, or earn, your own hammock, you'll string it tight and high, well away from the chickens and the inevitable midnight vomit. For now, though, you just watch that empty hammock sway, dreaming for a moment that it's yours. That tonight, you'll climb in, curl up, and drift to sleep without waking soaked, bruised, or chewed. Then the ship lurches, a wave slaps the hull, and a new day of half-sleep and endless motion begins again. You're halfway through the morning when the bell rings out, a single clang, sharp and echoing through the damp air, and just like that, you remember, it's your turn for the midnight watch tonight. Fantastic. One more little sleep-murdering tradition in a long list of nautical inconveniences. You sigh and glance at the clouds gathering low on the horizon. They're bruised and bloated, looking like trouble. Hopefully it doesn't storm. Then again, when you're part of a pirate crew, hopefully rarely amounts to much. The watch system on a pirate ship is simple on the surface and cruel in execution. You're not just allowed to sleep whenever you want. This isn't a pleasure cruise. Every man has a duty shift, and if you're not working, you're either preparing to work, being yelled at for not working, or, if you're lucky, sleeping, but only until your next shift starts. The sea never stops, and neither does the ship. That means someone's always awake, always alert, always keeping an eye out for sails on the horizon, or a rogue wave, or signs the cook is burning the last of the salted pork again. And the shifts? They're split into watches, usually 4-hour blocks rotating throughout the day and night. The worst one, hands down, is the midnight to 4 a.m. watch, affectionately nicknamed the Graveyard Watch, by anyone with a dark sense of humour and a pulse. It's the coldest, the quietest, the loneliest. And when it ends, it leaves you just enough time for a couple hours of fractured, groggy sleep before the deck wakes up again. It's basically the universe's way of saying, you didn't want to be warm or rested, right? You remember your last turn on that shift. The sea was calm, eerily so. The moonlit waves lapped softly against the hull, and the creaking of the ship stretched into long, aching yawns. You walked the deck alone, wrapped in your coat, eyes stinging from the salt air and sleep deprivation. Every shadow looked like a ghost ship. Every sudden splash felt like a hand reaching up from the deep. Your crewmates were tucked away below, twitching in their hammocks or slumped over sacks of grain, and you hated them all for being asleep. The worst part? Knowing that even once your shift ends, sleep isn't guaranteed. Let's say your 4-hour watch ends at dawn. Great. But now the galley needs cleaning, or the sails need mending, or the captain's having one of his moods again. So you catch 20 minutes of sleep in the corner with a rope for a pillow, just to be woken up by a flying chicken or a crewmate sharpening their cutlass 3 inches from your ear. This is why pirates didn't really sleep so much as they collapsed in small doses. Naps, if you want to be generous. Shallow, dreamless intermissions broken by noise, duty, or the occasional rat on your chest. Sleep was a currency as valuable as rum or gold. When someone found an extra hour, they hoarded it like treasure. And if you were dumb enough to try to nap during your shift, you'd be lucky to get off with just a bucket of cold water in the face. More likely you'd lose hammock privileges or find yourself on latrine duty for a week. Yet somehow they made it work. Pirates adapted. They learned to nap on their feet, doze sitting upright, drift off mid-conversation. You've seen a man snoring with one eye open, holding a knife, another lying across a pile of ropes like a cat sunbathing on laundry. The trick, they say, is to never aim for full sleep. Just dip beneath the surface long enough to trick your brain into thinking it rested. And if you're lucky, no one steps on you. The midnight watch also had a strange poetry to it. It was a quiet time, when the chaos of the day finally died down and the ocean stopped growling for just a bit. You could stand at the bow, feeling the salt spray on your face, and pretend you were the only person alive in the world. It was when confessions were whispered, songs were sung soft and low, and some of the more superstitious crewmates muttered their prayers to the dark waves, hoping the sea wouldn't take them before morning. And of course there were debates, half-lucid arguments about sleep, about time, about whether anyone had ever really slept through the night on a ship. Some swore they had, but you knew better. Maybe back on land, in a bed with walls and a roof in the absence of screaming gulls. But out here, sleep was a performance, a gamble, a truce between your body and the elements that always, always expired too soon. You remember when new recruits would join the crew, fresh-faced and cocky, expecting pirate life to be one long tavern brawl with occasional treasure maps. They never factored in the sleep, or lack of it. After 2 nights their eyes would go glassy. After a week they'd start falling asleep in the middle of a sentence. After 2 weeks they'd mutter nonsense at the rigging, convinced the sails were whispering back. That's how you knew they were either breaking or becoming one of you. Some pirates tried tricks. They'd chew cloves or citrus rinds to stay alert during late watches. One guy used to jab himself with a fishhook to stay awake. Another swore by humming sea shanties non-stop, even under his breath. A few used sleep as leverage, offering to swap watch duties in exchange for food, clothing or favours. And every once in a while someone just snapped and said, "I'm done," and laid down on the deck in the middle of a shift. Those ones didn't last long. And then there's the fringe theory, a quiet, half-joking belief among some historians, that pirates might have stumbled upon a form of polyphasic sleep long before modern science caught up. Instead of one big sleep, they took 4 or 5 micronaps throughout the day, not because they wanted to, but because they had to. And maybe, just maybe, that's how they survived. Barely. Now, with the sun fully rising and the watch assignments freshly nailed to the mast, you brace yourself for the long, slow countdown to midnight. You'll work, You'll eat, you'll try to steal a nap or two, and when the bell tolls and the moon rides high, you'll climb the stairs again, take your post and face the cold, empty deck, while everyone else chases their scraps of sleep. And when your shift ends, you'll lie down somewhere, anywhere, and beg your body to give you an hour. Just 1 hour without dreams, without noise, without the cold creeping back in. 1 hour. That's all you ever really ask for out here. It's late afternoon now, and the air's gone heavy with salt and sweat. The sun is burning low, dragging long, crooked shadows across the deck, and the wind's begun to die. You're sitting on an overturned bucket near the mainmast, rubbing a patch of rope burn on your palm, when someone behind you starts complaining, again, about blankets, or more accurately, the lack of them. It sparks a familiar chorus of grumbling, and soon everyone around you is reliving the eternal struggle of trying to sleep with nothing but a damp coat and a bad attitude. Blankets aboard a pirate ship are a bit of a myth. Sure, some lucky dogs had them, stolen from merchant ships, looted from coastal towns, maybe even swiped from some poor naval officer's bed during a drunken raid. But those were rare. Most of the crew made do with whatever they could wrap themselves in. A length of old sail, an extra shirt, a bit of canvas. If it offered even a shred of warmth, it became bedding. And when someone did manage to get their hands on a real blanket, oh, it became sacred, like gold, but warmer. Fights broke out over those things. One time, a guy named Digger John nearly bit off another man's ear after catching him borrowing his woolen cover. From then on, John slept with a knife in his hand, and the blanket wrapped around him like a second skin, muttering threats to anyone who got within arm's reach. But let's talk about the few actual blankets that floated around the ship. Most were coarse wool, itchy, stiff, and never truly dry. Wool was chosen because it insulates even when wet, but that didn't make it comfortable. You'd lie there wrapped up like a disgruntled burrito, scratching at your neck and wondering if the crawling feeling on your leg was in your head or something with legs. Spoiler, it usually had legs. Sometimes the blanket was shared too, especially during colder nights. 2 men might lie back to back under one ragged square of wool, not because they liked each other, but because body heat was better than dying. There's a kind of unspoken agreement in that setup. No talking, no moving, and absolutely no farting. Break the rules, and you'd get booted out, left to shiver in your shame. But the blanket itself, it was always the centre of some minor drama. There were pirate superstitions about them. One claimed that if you slept with a stolen blanket, the soul of its former owner would haunt your dreams. Another insisted that sleeping under a red blanket meant you'd live through the next raid, while blue meant you'd die cold and forgotten. Silly, maybe. But when your life's built on luck and superstition, even a threadbare square of wool can take on mythical weight. Now, fringe historians, those slightly more eccentric scholars with questionable sources and big theories, have a few curious takes on pirate bedding. Some claim that pirate captains intentionally kept the crew cold and miserable at night so they'd be more aggressive and irritable in battle. Sounds wild, but considering how many of these captains were barely sane to begin with, it's not completely off the map. Others believe that pirates developed a system of blanket bartering, a kind of shipboard economy where warmth was currency. Lost your knife? Trade an hour under someone's blanket. Want someone to cover your watch shift? Offer them your blanket for the night. Again, hard to confirm, but given the constant resource scarcity, it makes sense. Warmth equals power. You personally remember one ragged old thing that made the rounds for months. Everyone called it the Queen's Robe. Sarcastically, of course. It had once been deep burgundy, now faded to a sickly pink, with weird embroidery no one could make sense of. Rumour said it came from a noblewoman's bedchamber in Cadiz, though no one could prove it. What mattered was that it was thick, heavy, and warm when dry. It passed from pirate to pirate, usually through theft or gambling losses. One week you'd see Pegleg Barry snoring under it, and the next Old Man Niles would be wearing it like a cape, strutting around like royalty. The Queen's Robe was status, comfort, and bragging rights all in one, until it fell overboard during a storm, and the entire crew observed a moment of actual, genuine silence. The tragedy of pirate bedding is that even when you had it, you couldn't trust it. Blankets got wet constantly, whether from rain, rogue waves, spilled rum, or just the ship sweating in the night. And once wool gets wet, it stays wet. You might wring it out, drape it near a lantern to dry, or pray the sun gives you a break. But most nights, you end up cocooned in damp, smelly insulation, dreaming of a fireplace that doesn't creak when it moves. There was also the ever-present issue of lice. Those little monsters didn't care how tough you were. They nested in cloth, and if your blanket was more than a week old, and they all were, then you had hitchhikers. Some pirates tried boiling their blankets in seawater, which only worked halfway. Others set fire to the corners, hoping to smoke the pests out. More than a few just gave up and made peace with their new six-legged roommates. You've seen blankets used in all kinds of ways beyond sleep too. Makeshift sails in a pinch, wrapped around injured crewmates to stop the shaking, torn into strips for bandages. One guy wore his like a toga during shore leave and declared himself Lord of the Sand. He got punched, but the moment lives on, and in all this chaos the blanket becomes a symbol, not of comfort exactly, but of survival, of scraping together a few square feet of warmth in a world that seems built to take it from you. You hold on to it like you hold on to everything else out here, with both hands and one eye open. You think about your own current blanket situation, which is bleak. You've got a coat with a missing sleeve, a spare shirt you sometimes sleep under, and a piece of old tarp that smells like fish and dreams deferred. It's not glamorous, but you make do. Everyone does. So tonight, when your watch ends and the ship groans into another icy breath of midnight, you'll find your spot, curl up in your layers, and imagine, just for a second, that you're back under the Queen's robe, warm, dry, untouchable. Just don't fall asleep too deep. You never know who's looking for a blanket of their own. The sun has officially dipped below the edge of the world, and a hush settles over the deck. Not silence, exactly, but a kind of tired agreement between the wind, the wood, and the crew. It's that in-between hour, when the sky turns indigo and the ropes sway just a little slower. You've made it through another day, your skin sun-bitten, your back sore, and your stomach begrudgingly full of something resembling stew. You lean against the railing, feeling the chill return. It starts with your fingertips and creeps inward like a slow leak into your bones. This is the part of the day when everyone starts looking for a place to collapse, and you know what's coming. The cold. Not the kind you can shake off by moving around or pulling on another layer. No, this is the creeping, ever-present, steal-your-soul kind of cold that wraps itself around you while you sleep and dares you to do something about it. And that's where body heat comes in. Now, pirates might have been known for their swagger and their swords, but when it came to staying warm, they didn't let pride get in the way. Body heat? That was your best friend. Your only real heater on a floating box of misery surrounded by icy black ocean. When temperatures dropped and the wind howled through the rigging, pirates did what any half-frozen human would do. They huddled. They spooned. They piled in together like a litter of mangy dogs trying not to die before morning. You remember one winter week off the coast of Newfoundland. The wind never stopped. It came through the cracks in the hull like a pack of wolves, and every breath felt like biting down on ice. Everyone was miserable. Even the rum wasn't cutting it. So, in the dead of night, one by one, the men started migrating. Slowly, casually. No eye contact. Just a shuffle here, a sigh there, until 4 of you were pressed together under a shared tarp, pretending nothing unusual was happening. No one spoke. No one had to. It was the unspoken rule of the sea. Survival over shame. Warmth over ego. It's not exactly glamorous. Sleeping tangled up with 3 other unwashed pirates, all of you wrapped in sweat and brine, your limbs stiff and your noses half frozen. But it works. After a while, the combined heat starts to push back the cold. Your shoulders unclench, your hands stop shaking, and even if it's just for an hour or 2, your body remembers what it means to rest. Of course, the logistics of group sleeping were always messy. Pirates weren't exactly known for personal hygiene. Between the lice, the infections, the constant layer of filth, and the generous helpings of flatulence, cuddling wasn't anyone's first choice. But when the choice was spooning or freezing, spooning usually won. Some crews had nicknames for this nightly practice. The captain's stack, the human furnace, the snuggle brig. You've heard them all, and always spoken with a wink and a scowl like they were in on the joke but didn't really have a choice. Because they didn't. There were politics to it too. You didn't just climb in with anyone. You picked someone roughly the same size, big enough to generate heat, but not so big that they'd smother you. Someone who didn't talk in their sleep or twitch violently. And if you could help it, someone who hadn't eaten beans that day. It wasn't all desperation though. Every so often a friendship formed in those shared blankets. You'd end up sleeping next to the same person night after night, not out of romance, but out of mutual necessity. You'd learn each other's rhythms, when they shifted, when they snored, when they started having those weird sleep murmurs about goats and treasure. And slowly, that awkward nightly ritual became routine, even comforting. You once slept next to a guy named Corbin for 3 months straight. Big man, smelled like rope and sardines, but warm as a forge. He'd wrap his arms around you like a bear trap and snore directly into your ear, but in the dead of winter you'd have taken that over frostbite any day. He even shared his blanket, more of a rug really, but he guarded it like it was his daughter's dowry. The deal was, you bring the rum, you get the warm spot. Fair enough. Some pirates had tricks. You'd see them warming rocks near the galley fire and slipping them into their bedding like primitive hot water bottles. Others tucked flasks of warmed grog into their coats. You even heard of one guy who filled a pig bladder with hot water, tied it off, and used it like a pillow. Not exactly elegant, but creative. And when you're cold, creativity is the only currency that matters. Historical records don't say much about this kind of thing. Most chroniclers were too busy writing about battles and mutinies to mention two pirates spooning for warmth. But there are whispers. Journals with odd phrases like, slept doubled with Fergus, or shared the heat with the lads. Modern historians have argued about it for years. Some claim these sleeping arrangements suggest emotional bonds or even romantic ones. Others say no, this was just practical survival. Nothing romantic about shivering under a tarp with 3 guys who haven't bathed since port. Maybe it was both, maybe neither. The truth is, when the wind howls and the sea's got its claws in you, the last thing you're thinking about is historical accuracy. You just want to wake up with all your toes still attached. Tonight it looks like it's going to be one of those huddle nights. The wind's already picking up, and the air has that hard edge that says frost isn't far behind. You eye the sleeping area below deck, already half full of bodies curled up in corners and creaking hammocks. There's an empty space near a pair of barrels half covered with a tarp. Not ideal, but maybe warm. You nod at a crewmate, done, skinny as a pole but twice as cranky, and jerk your chin toward the spot. He grunts, shrugs, and follows. Neither of you says a word as you settle in, pull the tarp over your shoulders and shift until you're back to back, elbow to elbow. It's not comfortable, but it's warmer than being alone. And as the cold presses in, as the ship rocks gently and the last lantern is doused, you feel the day slipping away. You'll sleep light. You always do, but you'll sleep. And if your shoulder gets a little numb or Dunn rolls over and drools on your arm, well, better that than freezing to death. You close your eyes and listen to the sea breathing outside, steady and slow. Somewhere overhead the stars are out, but down here, in this narrow corner of creaking wood and shared warmth, you've carved out a little piece of peace. For now, it's enough. By morning the peace is gone. It starts with the slap of wet cloth hitting your face, a foul-smelling tunic dropped unceremoniously from the upper hammock. You peel it off, half asleep and already regretting everything, and glare upward, where Grady is busy rummaging through a bag that may or may not be his. He's muttering curses under his breath, something about everything being soaked again, and from the smell of it, he's not wrong. You sit up, joints cracking like old rigging, and your shirt sticks to your back with that cold, wet kiss only seawater and sweat can deliver. Your boots are still damp, your blanket, if you could call it that, is just a salty rag, and you know before even checking that your other shirt didn't dry overnight. Of course it didn't. You're on a medieval pirate ship. Nothing ever dries. And here's the thing, once you're wet, you stay wet. It's not like you've got a wardrobe down here. Pirates didn't carry trunks full of clothes, and they certainly didn't have waterproof lockers or laundry lines strung with lavender-scented linens. You had your clothes, the ones on your back, maybe a spare shirt, a pair of socks if you were blessed by Neptune himself, and everything else was someone else's problem. Getting soaked was a daily guarantee. Rainstorms, rogue waves, spilled buckets, sweat, spray, even your own clumsy mug of grog tipping over mid-dinner. And once your clothes were wet, they stayed that way. Hanging them up to dry below deck was a joke. The air was already wet. Above deck, the wind might dry them faster, but it also might blow them overboard, and suddenly you're explaining to the quartermaster why you're shirtless at dawn. So what do? You wear them anyway. You put on that cold, clammy shirt that might have frozen stiff in the night. You slap on your socks, still sour from yesterday's seawater. You pull on your coat, damp, crusted with salt and stiff as leather, and pretend it's warm. And then you work. Because pirate life doesn't pause for wardrobe malfunctions. There's a sort of grim humour to it, though. Watching your crewmates stomp around in clothes that look like they were fished out of a swamp. A guy trying to wring out his breeches while swearing vengeance on the sea. Another tying rags around his arms like makeshift sleeves because he lost his real ones during a brawl in Tangier. And always, the same complaints. Still wet. Haven't been dry in 3 weeks. This shirt smells like something died in it. Probably because something did. You take a moment to air out your shirt by flapping it up and down. It does absolutely nothing. The fabric slaps back against your chest with a cold splat, and now it smells even worse. Somehow a mix of mildew, tobacco and regret. Lovely. There were a few rare solutions pirates came up with to combat the wet clothes nightmare. Some would rub hot sand into their garments, then shake them out near a fire to try to absorb the moisture. It was crude and probably more effective at exfoliating the fabric down to threads than drying it, but it made them feel like they were doing something, and sometimes that's all that mattered. Others tried oils, rubbing lamp oil or whale fat on the cloth to create a crude water-resistant layer. Of course, that also meant your shirt was now flammable and smelled like a dying lantern. But it was worth the trade for a little warmth. You once saw a man soak his shirt in rum, light it briefly to burn off the moisture, and then proudly wear it, singed holes and all. He called it seasoned. Everyone else called him insane. But the worst part of it wasn't the discomfort. It wasn't even the smell, though that was impressive in its own right. It was the way it wore you down. Cold, wet clothing sucked the energy right out of you. It made you move slower, think slower. It gave the cold permission to sink deeper into your bones, down past the muscle and into the marrow. It was how people got sick, how fevers crept in, how a cough turned into a death sentence, and how your crew slowly thinned out, not always in battle, but in the quiet, cold hours of early morning. There's a superstition about that, actually. Some pirates believed that the sea punished those who tried too hard to stay dry, that trying to fight the wetness was like insulting the ocean, as if you thought you were above it. So instead, you were supposed to embrace it. Live in the wet, move with the wet, become the wet. Which sounds poetic until you're lying in a puddle of seawater, trying to dry your underpants with a spoonful of rum and hope. Now you glance across the deck at one of the younger lads, maybe 15, clinging to the rigging with his sleeves dripping rainwater down to his elbows. He looks miserable and wet. You remember being that new, still shocked by how endless the sea was, how loud the sails snapped in the wind, and how quickly everything you owned could turn to soggy trash. Eventually the cold teaches you to adapt. You stop trying to stay dry. You start sleeping in your clothes, because you're going to wake up soaked anyway. You give up the idea of fresh anything. When your boots squish, you don't react. When your shirt smells like old cheese, you breathe through your mouth. When someone sneezes next to you and sprays seawater and snot across your face, you blink, wipe it off, and keep tying knots. And maybe, on a good day, you catch the sun. Maybe the wind shifts just right, and for an hour or two your shirt flaps dry against your back and you think, I might survive this after all. There's still debate among historians about how pirates dealt with wet clothing in winter. Some say they simply layered until it didn't matter. Others argue that pirates would scavenge better gear from captured ships. Thicker cloaks, waterproof capes, or even bits of sail turned into ponchos. Then there are the fringe theories. That pirates hunted seals off cold coasts for fur-lined garments, or that they wore waxed linen like medieval raincoats. Evidence is spotty, and honestly it probably varied ship to ship. But one thing is certain, no pirate ever stayed dry for long, and maybe that's the point. The ocean didn't just surround you, it soaked into your life, into your food, your sleep, your skin, your very bones. You were never separate from it. You were part of it, a wet, squelching, semi-mildewed part of it. You sigh, wring out your sleeve for the 3rd time that morning, and head below deck, where someone's already complaining about the damp bedding again. You settle back into your corner, lean against the hull, and accept the chill climbing up your spine like it's an old friend. After all, you'll be wearing this wet shirt to sleep, just like you did yesterday, just like you will tomorrow, because comfort is a myth, but sleep's still a necessity, even if you wake up wetter than you went to bed. Later that night, the air below deck is thick, stagnant, sour, and weirdly warm in all the worst ways. The crew's quieted down for now, settling into whatever nooks and crevices they've claimed for sleep. You can hear the groaning of the ship's timbers above, the occasional flap of sails, and someone retching softly behind a stack of barrels. Business as usual. You've just managed to wrap yourself in your damp tarp again when the unmistakable stench of rum breath wafts past your face. Someone lurches into the space beside you, thumps down with all the grace of a falling log, and lets out a groan that sounds like it came from the bottom of the sea. Ah, yes, tavern night has made its return. Not every pirate had the luxury of a dry throat and clear senses when bedtime rolled around. In fact, most didn't even aim for it. A proper evening aboard often meant heavy drinking. Not because the crew was celebrating, not because there was something worth toasting, but because sometimes the only way to sleep through the cold, the stink, and the backaches was to drink until your mind stopped protesting. You've done it. Everyone has. There's a moment, usually about 3/4 of the way through a shared jug, when the world starts to blur, and the misery of ship life fades behind a warm fog. The creaks of the hull become a lullaby. The rats, just background dancers, and the fact that your bedding is a tangle of damp rope and a regrettable shirt becomes a distant concern. Rum doesn't solve the problem, but it sure helps you forget it for a while. The stuff you're drinking isn't smooth. It's not aged in oak barrels or served with a slice of citrus. It's rough, raw, and suspiciously flammable. It's probably been cut with seawater, or worse, and it burns like fire on the way down. But when your choices are shivering in silence or passing out with a numb face and a warm belly, you take the fire every time. You remember once, during a stopover in Tortuga, you and a few others found a cask of something the barkeep swore was rum. You drank it anyway. Half the crew ended up howling at the moon, the other half swearing they saw mermaids. You woke up inside a chicken coop wearing someone else's breeches. But that night you actually slept. Deep, dreamless, and warm. If only because you were too far gone to care that you were lying in hay and feathers. Rum became part of the bedtime ritual. For some, it was just a couple swigs before lying down. For others, it was a full bender followed by blacking out in the hold. You'd see guys still gripping the bottle in their sleep, snoring with one boot on, and a wide grin like they were dreaming of treasure, or their mother's soup, or something else the sea had taken away. But there's a darker edge to it too. You've seen men lose themselves to the bottle entirely. The ones who drink just to get through the day, and then drink more so they can sleep without remembering it. They start skipping meals, stop cleaning themselves, they rot from the inside out. Eventually their dreams twist. Nightmares of drowning, of fire, of being trapped in the belly of the ship as it sinks. And the thing about rum-fueled sleep? It's not real sleep. It knocks you out, sure, but it doesn't let your mind rest. You wake up feeling like you've been dragged behind a rowboat, your mouth dry as sand, your stomach churning, and the cold back with a vengeance. The headache's bad enough, but the worst part is the way your bones feel heavier, like the sea got in and settled there while you were unconscious. There are debates among historians about just how central alcohol was to pirate life. Some argue that pirates drank more than any other seafarers, naval men included, because they had access to looted stores and less oversight. Others believe the image of the perpetually drunk pirate is exaggerated, that many crews rationed alcohol carefully, saving it for celebration or morale. And then, of course, there's the fringe theory that some captains deliberately encouraged their crews to drink heavily, making them easier to control, slower to mutiny, and quicker to forget the nightmares that came with a life at sea. You've seen it all. The careful sippers, the cheerful drunks, the mean ones who pick fights just before bed, the silent ones who drink until their eyes glaze over and they slide quietly into their corner, and the dangerous ones who think the ocean's calling to them and try to jump overboard in the middle of the night. But you can't deny the pattern. Rum made sleep possible, or at least seem possible. Tonight, you haven't had any, not because you don't want it, but because your ration went missing. Missing being the polite term for lifted by a faster hand. You suspect Dunn, maybe Grady. Could have been that wiry kid with the fast fingers and the face like a lost rabbit. Either way, the rum's gone, and your chances of a good night's sleep just evaporated with it. Around you, the crew's settling in. Snoring starts up like a bad orchestra, deep, wet, uneven. Someone's muttering. Someone else lets out a short, sharp laugh, dreaming about who knows what, and that warm-breathed mess who flopped down next to you. He's already out cold, breath thick with booze, face pressed into his arms. You're envious. Almost. Instead, you lie there, arms crossed, your tarp pulled high, waiting for your brain to quiet down. but it doesn't. It spins, slowly, distracted by every creak, every gust of cold air, every splash against the hull. You envy the ones who can knock themselves out with drink, who drift into oblivion without a second thought. And you wonder, just for a second, if sleep even counts when you're not really present for it. If forgetting the cold is worth surrendering your awareness. If escaping the nightmare just leads you into another one, you close your eyes anyway. The deck groans, the waves murmur, and somewhere above the stars wheel slowly across the sky. You breathe, count backward from 20, and imagine the weight of rum warming your belly. And maybe, if you pretend hard enough, sleep will come. There's a special kind of madness that comes with sleep deprivation at sea, and nowhere is that madness more palpable than up in the crow's nest, high above the deck, alone with the wind, the stars, and whatever pieces of your mind are still hanging on by a thread. That's where you've been assigned tonight. You didn't ask for it. You certainly didn't volunteer. But when the first mate barked out the shift assignments and your name came up, all you could do was nod and climb. The ladder rungs are slick with salt and just a little too far apart. Your arms ache before you're even halfway up, and your knees complain with every shove upward. By the time you reach the top, you're panting and already questioning your life choices. The crow's nest isn't glamorous. It's a cramped little barrel nailed to the top of the mainmast, just wide enough for one unlucky soul to stand. Or sit, if you're creative and don't mind wedging yourself between the ropes like a pigeon nesting in a mousetrap. And it's cold. Not cold like the deck. Not even cold like the hold. This is wind screaming through your marrow cold. Up here, there's no shelter, no canvas to duck under, no crewmates to huddle with. Just you, the mast and the wind, which never seems to shut up. You try to settle in, wrapping your arms around your knees, using your coat as a half-hearted cocoon. The crow's nest rocks with every tilt of the ship, and your stomach rolls with it, because who needs stability when you're 20 feet above a wooden death trap? You're supposed to be on lookout, of course, eyes on the horizon, alert for enemy sails, storms, or whatever floating debris might tear the hull open like a rotten apple. But at this hour, with the sea calm and nothing moving but the stars, your eyelids start to sag. You fight it. You know better. But the motion, the dark, the cold, it all conspires to lull you into a dangerous stillness. And that's how it starts. The desperate forbidden nap in the crow's nest. You tell yourself you'll just rest your eyes, just for a moment. No harm in that. But the second your head slumps against the side of the mast, your brain starts to drift. The wood is hard and cold against your temple, but it's real. It's something to anchor you while your mind slides sideways into sleep. It's not even the first time. Plenty of pirates have dozed off up here. It's practically tradition. They all deny it, of course. Too proud to admit they nodded off during watch. But you've heard the snoring. You've seen the guys climb down in the morning with necks locked up like broken marionettes and dried drool crusted down one cheek. The danger is real, though. A strong gust, a sudden lurch, and you could be tumbling from your perch like a rag doll tossed from a shelf. It's happened. Everyone knows someone who took the quick way down. There's no recovery from that kind of fall, not unless you're lucky enough to hit the sailcloth on the way. Most just disappear into the dark water below. No splash, no shout, just gone. Still, the temptation is strong. Up here, you're removed from the stink and the snoring. The sky is vast and weirdly comforting. The stars above are bright, smeared across the sky like silver oil. You trace the constellations, ones you remember from childhood, ones you've renamed for the crew, the rat, the broken oar, the drunken cook. You breathe deep and your chest stops feeling so tight. And then, just as you're on the edge of slipping into full sleep, your mind kicks up something strange. Maybe it's the wind whispering nonsense in your ears. Maybe it's the echo of that half-litre of rum you snuck earlier. But suddenly you swear you hear voices. Faint, distant, like someone singing far off across the water. You blink, shake your head. Nothing but waves and stars. You lean out over the edge just a little. Too far, really. And squint into the dark. Still nothing. This is how it happens, you realise. The line between sleep and sanity starts to blur. Up here, where your world is reduced to sky and wind and the endless dark ocean, your brain starts pulling tricks to fill the silence. There are tales, quiet ones, whispered in the hold when the lanterns flicker, about pirates who stayed up in the crow's nest too long, who stopped coming down, who claimed they could see things the rest of the crew couldn't. Ships made of mist, ghost sails, women in the water singing promises of warm beds and dry blankets. The fringe historians love this stuff. They theorise that extended exposure to the isolation and movement of the crow's nest caused something akin to sensory hallucination, a sleep-deprived, hypothermia-triggered state of mind that gave rise to the many sea legends we still tell today. Mermaids, ghost ships, sea serpents, all the children of lonely sailors rocking gently on the edge of madness. You shift your position, trying to stretch without unbalancing yourself. Your legs have started to go numb, and the winds change direction, slicing through your coat from a new angle. You'd kill for a bit of canvas up here, even a damp blanket, anything. But what you have instead is a wooden rim to lean against and the soft creak of the mast beneath you, singing its quiet lullaby of worn rope and old wood. Your eyes close again. You dream briefly of warm bread, of a fireplace, of dry socks. Then something stirs in your periphery, and your eyes snap open, heart racing. False alarm. Just the moon rising higher, casting new shadows. You're awake now mostly. Enough to remember where you are. Enough to count the time left on your shift. Still 2 hours to go. And so you brace yourself again. You sit straighter. You pull your coat tighter. You whisper a few curse words at the wind because it deserves them. And you wait. Because on a pirate ship, even sleep is a gamble, especially when you're 20 feet above deck clinging to a barrel in the sky. You don't even notice at first. The change is subtle. Just a weird stillness to the air, like the ship's holding its breath. No creaking, no slap of waves, no wind rattling the sails. It's the kind of quiet that feels unnatural, like the world's been muted by something vast and cold and invisible. You shift in the crow's nest, blinking hard, squinting into the dark as the unease crawls slowly up your spine. And then you see it. Not see exactly, more like fail to see. The water ahead is frozen, not like shards or slush. Frozen. Solid. A gleaming sheet of moonlit glass stretching across the horizon like a frozen wound in the sea. Ice thick and wide and wrong, with the ship heading straight toward it. You scramble down the rigging like a spider with a death wish, thumping hard onto the deck, shouting for the quartermaster before your feet even hit solid wood. Within moments, bells are ringing, crew members are shouting, the ship groans under the strain of hasty manoeuvring, and the captain's voice roars from the helm like a cannon blast. "Hard to starboard!" Too late. The hull crunches into the ice with a sound you'll never forget, like a giant snapping a tree in its mouth. The ship lurches sideways, pitching you into the deck. Splinters spray. Somewhere above, canvas tears with a scream of angry cloth, and then everything is motionless. You sit up slowly, dazed, as the terrible realization sets in. You're stuck, frozen in place. This is every sailor's nightmare. The unspoken fear no one talks about unless they're drunk or foolish. Being caught in sea ice, not drifting icebergs, but fast ice. The kind that forms on the surface and locks a ship in place like a fly in amber. It's rare, especially for pirate waters, but not impossible. All it takes is one terrible cold snap in northern waters, one night of miscalculation, and you're not sailing anymore, you're trapped. The crew scrambles in all directions, checking the hull for cracks, assessing the masts, arguing, shouting over each other, trying to make sense of it. The captain's jaw is tight, eyes scanning the horizon for any sign of open water, but there's none. Just ice, stretching out in every direction like the ship's been dropped into a dead white desert. You've got no choice but to wait, and that's when the cold really begins to creep in. Before the ship was moving, cutting through the waves, generating friction, at least giving you the illusion of life. But now it's still. The cold settles on the ship like a blanket dipped in death. The hull stiffens, the ropes go brittle, even your breath feels heavier in your lungs. The wind picks up with an eerie keening sound, whistling across the ice like it's searching for something to carry away. Down below deck it's worse. The usual dampness has gone solid. Frost forms along the beams, the walls sweat ice. You press your hand to the wood and it burns your skin from cold. Your hammock, if you were lucky enough to have one, is stiff. The canvas crackles when you touch it. The bedding is less of a bed, and more of a crunchy pile of disappointment. The men wrap themselves tighter in what few blankets they've got. Someone tries lighting a candle, hoping it'll warm up a small corner. The flame barely holds, shivering in the draught. You see someone wearing 2 coats at once, one forward, one backward, like a sad pirate sandwich. The cook, usually a cheery bundle of threats and onions, is hunched near the stove, muttering to himself, holding a pot of water that refuses to boil. You take your spot near the rear hold, where the barrels of salted meat are stored. Not because it's warmer, there's no warm spot left, but because it's out of the wind. You curl into yourself like a shrimp, tucking your hands into your armpits, trying to breathe shallow so the air doesn't cut your throat. This isn't just cold anymore, it's hostile. The kind of cold that makes your bones ache and your heart beat slower. Sleep? Forget it. No one sleeps well when the ship's frozen in place. You close your eyes anyway, just for a minute, but your body's too alert, too tense. You drift in and out, dreaming briefly that the ship has thawed, that you're sailing again, that someone brought up hot soup and dry socks. Then you wake up to the sound of wood snapping somewhere overhead, and someone cursing in a language you don't recognise. And still, the ship doesn't move. In this stillness, strange things begin to happen. Paranoia creeps in. A fight breaks out over a dry blanket. Someone accuses someone else of stealing boots. You hear whispered stories of ghost ships, frozen in the ice forever, crews locked below deck, knocking faintly on the hull for centuries. You'd laugh if your teeth weren't chattering so hard. The officers take turns checking for cracks in the hull, but even they're starting to look grim. One guy swears he saw movement under the ice. Dark shapes gliding just beneath the surface. Could be a seal. Could be something worse. No one's willing to tap the ice and find out. By the second night, people start going quiet. The jokes stop. The bickering slows. Everyone's energy is spent just trying to conserve heat. One guy, Oates, you think his name was, starts humming sea shanties under his breath over and over again. His lips are blue. His fingers look like wax. Then there's Finch, who claims he doesn't feel the cold anymore. Stripped down to his undershirt, smiling like he's in a tavern somewhere warm. That's when you know the frost's gotten into his brain. Someone tries to wrap him in a blanket. He fights them off. They let him be. You all do. What else can you do? Fringe historians have debated the frequency of pirate ships freezing into place. Some say it's a myth, something exaggerated in retellings to make the stories more dramatic. Others argue there are enough scattered logs and accounts, abandoned ships found with frostbitten corpses, ice-carved names in the wood, to suggest it happened more than we'd like to admit. It wasn't common, but it wasn't unheard of. And when it did happen, those crews didn't write about it afterward. They didn't get to. You're lucky. On the third morning, the wind shifts. A crack echoes through the ice like thunder. Then another, and slowly, painfully, the ship groans forward. The ice breaks. The crew doesn't cheer. They don't even move at first. Just stunned silence. And then, one by one, people begin to exhale again. To move. To live. That night, when you finally lie down, the bedding still icy, your feet still numb, you sleep. Not because it's warm, but because you're free. And because somehow, you made it through. By the time your ship limps into northern waters again, you already know what's waiting for you. It starts with a subtle shift in the wind, a bite to the breeze that wasn't there yesterday, like someone took the edge of a blade and slid it under your collar. Then the ropes start to stiffen. The sails grow heavy. You breathe in and it stings, cold crawling down your throat like smoke from a dead fire. You're sailing into winter, and this time it's not sneaking up on you. This time it's marching straight through the hull. Everything changes when the cold gets serious. Back in the tropics, you could almost forget what it meant to be chilled to the bone. Sure, the nights were damp and uncomfortable, but they didn't feel dangerous. Not like this. Now, even the jokes are quiet. The crew stops fighting each other just long enough to focus on shivering in unison. There's frost clinging to the ropes in the morning. Your shirt freezes into shape if you hang it up for too long, and your breath is a constant ghost in front of your face. Even your teeth feel colder, and not just from the air. You feel it deep in your gums like the roots are being replaced with icicles. You run your tongue over them and wince. They feel brittle. Like if you bit down on a biscuit, they'd snap. Beards start freezing too. That's when you know you're truly in it. You wake up with ice crystals hanging off your chin, your breath having built a tiny shrine to suffering overnight. You see other men with their facial hair frozen stiff, the strands standing out in awkward little spikes. You're all walking around like frostbitten scarecrows trying not to break anything important. The wood of the ship groans louder than usual, an old painful kind of groaning. Cold contracts everything. It pulls on the beams, tightens the joints. You swear you can feel the whole ship curling in on itself, trying to survive. Your boots are hard as stone. You try to move, but your muscles resist like they're stuck in syrup. And you're still expected to work, of course. No one's out here on vacation. The sails need trimming. The lines need tightening. The deck needs to be cleared of ice every morning, chipped away with whatever blunt instrument is available, often your bare hands. You slip. You curse. You wipe your nose on your sleeve and you keep moving. There's a rhythm to the misery. You move, you work, you freeze, you eat something barely warm, and then you try to sleep. Except sleep in this kind of cold becomes less of a restorative act and more of a physical negotiation. You climb into your hammock, or under it, or next to it, wherever there's space, and try to tuck every possible inch of your body inside whatever layers you can scrape together. Shirt over shirt, coat over coat, blankets wrapped like bandages, and still it seeps in. You lie there, curled like a wounded animal, your breath condensing against the cloth, making your clothes wetter by the second. You press your hands between your thighs to keep them from going stiff. Your toes are numb within minutes. You try to sleep, but your jaw keeps clenching from the cold, and when you finally drift off, it's a shallow, haunted thing. You dream of fire that never quite warms you, of beds you can't reach, of ice creeping up your legs like it's alive. You've heard the horror stories, men who went to sleep and didn't wake up. No wounds, no battle scars, just frozen, breathless, stiff by dawn. Sometimes they didn't even look dead, just a little too still, a little too quiet. Like they were waiting for something that never came. There was a guy, Big Henrik, massive fellow, thick beard, always laughing, always stomping around like the cold couldn't touch him. One morning, you all found him curled up near the livestock pen, still smiling. At first you thought he was just asleep. Then someone poked him with the end of a mop and he didn't move. Frozen solid. Took 4 men to carry him up. You didn't even have enough spare cloth to wrap him properly. Just stitched him into some old sail and dropped him overboard with the dignity of a broken barrel. After that, no one slept near the livestock again. Even the animals suffered. Chickens froze. The goat developed a cough that echoed through the hold like a dying harmonica. The rats somehow survived. Thrived, even. You'd see them curled together like little fur knots, smart enough to share heat without complaint. You considered joining them more than once. You find yourself wondering how people used to survive winters like this, on land at least. They had fireplaces, stone walls, woolen socks, grandmothers who made soup. You have a plank floor that's leaking cold like it's being paid to do it, and a shirt that smells like every bad decision you've made in the past 6 months. And here's the weird part. Your body adjusts, slowly, painfully. You become used to the ache in your knuckles, the constant twitch in your eyelids, the tightness in your chest every time you breathe in cold air. You don't stop hating it, but you stop being surprised by it. You wake up cold, work cold, eat cold, and sleep cold. It becomes the baseline. Some pirates deal with it through superstition. They wear charms, whisper to the sea. One guy claims his left sock keeps him warm, even though it has a hole big enough to see his ankle through. Another insists that if you sleep facing east, you won't lose fingers. You don't question it. If it works, it works. There's debate among historians about just how harsh pirate winters really were. Some say most pirates stuck to the warmer waters, Caribbean routes, West African coasts, places where you only had to worry about heat stroke and malaria. But others point out that pirates chased treasure wherever it went, and sometimes that meant following merchant ships north, into the teeth of winter. And when that happened, they didn't turn back. They endured, just like you. So tonight, as you curl into yourself, your face half wrapped in a scarf that smells like fish and ash, you brace for another battle with the cold. You know you won't win. Not really. But you'll survive it. And out here, that's as good as victory. You're lying there with your face buried in what's left of your scarf, eyes squeezed shut, hands jammed under your armpits in a desperate bid for warmth when the itch starts again. It's subtle at first. Just a tickle under your collar, then one near your waistband, then 2 more on your legs, like someone sprinkling grains of misery across your skin. You try to ignore it. Scratch and it gets worse. Don't scratch and you'll go insane. This is the classic wool dilemma. Nature's own trap disguised as protection. Wool was supposed to be a miracle, right? That's what they said. Warm even when wet. Durable. A pirate's best friend in cold weather. And on paper that sounds great. But they don't tell you that wool also feels like being wrapped in the bottom half of a hedgehog. It scratches. It clings. It irritates in places you didn't know you could feel. And when you've been wearing it non-stop for weeks, sleeping in it, sweating in it, crying into it, it turns against you like a mutinous crew member. You roll onto your side and try to stretch, but your shirt clings to your back like wet parchment. The itch spreads. You swear you can feel each individual thread grinding against your skin. You shift again, adjusting your scarf, which is also wool, and now your neck's on fire. You're not even sure if it's the fabric or your imagination at this point. You've reached that delicate stage of sleep deprivation where sensations blur with hallucinations, and your own shirt feels like it's plotting against you. You hear a groan from across the hold. Someone else is going through it. They're writhing in their hammock, muttering under their breath, one hand inside their shirt like they're trying to wrestle the itch into submission. Another guy sits bolt upright and rips his coat off with a snarl. "I swear," he says, "if this shirt was alive, I'd drown it." Everyone around him nods in silent, itchy solidarity. Wool is a cruel joke on a pirate ship. It's standard issue, assuming there is such a thing as standard on a ship, where half your wardrobe came from looted merchants, and the other half from a lucky dice roll. Sailors loved wool because it was cheap, available, and technically warm. But warm doesn't always mean comfortable. Not when it's caked with sweat, salt, and whatever invisible ecosystem has developed in its threads. And there's no washing it. Not really. Oh sure, some brave soul might swish their shirt around in a bucket of seawater, but that only makes it saltier. And you can forget soap. Real soap is a luxury item, hoarded by officers or reserved for patching up wounds. You once saw a guy use lye soap on a wool shirt and it melted part of the sleeve. He wore it anyway, said it added personality. Your own clothes haven't been cleaned in? Well, it's best not to count. They've dried and re-dried so many times the salt has started to crystallize, giving your shirt a texture somewhere between burlap and barnacle. You're pretty sure if you took it off and shook it hard enough it would stand up on its own and march off to start a new life. You scratch at your arm, then your side, then your neck. Each time, the relief lasts about 2 seconds before the itch returns tenfold. You're trying to remember what dry, clean cotton feels like. You vaguely recall owning a soft undershirt once back when you were young and hadn't yet traded comfort for chaos. Now you'd give your entire cut of plunder just to wear a linen tunic that didn't bite. Some pirates tried to solve the itch problem creatively. You once met a guy who lined the inside of his coat with rabbit fur. Another stitched scraps of sailcloth into his sleeves. One desperate man cut out the inside of his shirt entirely and just wore the outer shell like a weird itchy poncho. It didn't help. The wool always found a way to touch skin, to cling, to infiltrate. It was like it knew. There are historical accounts, sparse and vague, that reference sailors itching themselves raw during long voyages. One journal mentions a sailor who shaved off all his body hair because he believed it made the wool less aggressive. Another described midshipman's rash, an unofficial name for the raw red patches that bloomed under collars and cuffs like angry coral. The fringe historians, the ones who dig into old ship logs with obsessive glee, have found letters where sailors begged family members to send softer undergarments. Some got their hands on silk or linen liners and were treated like royalty, at least until someone stole them. Because out here, even a clean shirt was worth fighting over. There's also debate among scholars about whether pirates adapted their clothing when they could. Some argue that more successful crews, especially those raiding colder territories, would actively target merchant ships carrying fine cloth. Not for resale, for personal use. Imagine boarding a vessel and ignoring the rum to tear through wardrobes looking for a cotton nightshirt. Honestly, not surprising. You lie back and try to ignore the latest wave of itchy betrayal crawling down your spine. You press your back flat against the wood in hopes the cold will numb the feeling. It kind of works. Kind of. Nearby, someone starts softly singing a shanty. Not a rousing one, just a slow, miserable dirge about a sailor who fell asleep in his wool and woke up on fire. It's barely a tune, more like a protest wrapped in melody. You hum along without realizing it. Eventually the itch dulls, or your brain gives up. You drift again, twitching here and there, swatting at phantoms. The last thing you think before sleep finally takes you is that if hell has a uniform, it's made of wet wool. You dream of linen, of silk, of cool sheets that don't make your skin crawl, and when you wake, sore, groggy, and still wearing the world's scratchiest shirt, you sigh and start scratching all over again. You're half asleep when the shout goes up. Not the urgent, battle kind of shout, just a nervous bark from someone above deck, followed by a hurried scuffle and the telltale thud of boots sprinting across planks. You groan, rolling onto your side, groggy, freezing, and fully expecting it to be another false alarm. Maybe someone spotted a shape in the mist. Maybe it's just a gull. But then you hear the word no one wants to hear in the dead of night. Fire. Your blood turns to ice. You're already moving, scrambling out from under your crusty tarp. Your bare fingers fumbling for your boots, your coat, anything. There's no time to think. No time to wonder who lit what or why. Fire at sea is worse than cannonballs, worse than starvation. It spreads fast. It finds the powder stores. It eats rope and sail and air until everything is smoke and splinters. You stumble up the steps, half the crew already pouring from below deck like rats from a flooding cellar. You smell it now, burnt pitch, acrid and sharp, wafting on the wind like a ghost's exhale. Smoke curls along the gunwale. You see it finally. A small blaze near the galley chimney where a lantern must have tipped, or someone got careless with a bit of grease-soaked rag. Someone's already stamping at it with a coat. Another guy swinging a bucket that probably hasn't seen water since Tuesday. You join in, of course. Everyone does. When fire threatens, even your worst enemy becomes your brother. You slap with your coat, you shout for more buckets, you curse the flames like they're listening. After what feels like hours, but is probably only minutes, the fire dies with a reluctant hiss, leaving behind a blackened patch of deck and a fresh layer of panic baked into your skull. And just like that, it's over. But the fear stays with you. Because fire, unlike cold, wet or hunger, feels personal, like betrayal. You're surrounded by water, and yet one spark can turn this floating world into a funeral pyre. Which is exactly why pirates avoided open flame at all costs. No stoves, no lanterns below deck unless heavily watched, and never any fire used for heat. You could freeze, you could itch, you could rot, but you could not burn. You return to your corner below, your heart still hammering, your hands smelling of soot and old sweat. Everything feels sharper now. The cold bites deeper. The dark seems thicker. You lie down again and pull your coat over your face, but your eyes won't close. You think about the things pirates did to stay warm without fire. The weird, desperate things. Some of it was ingenuity. You remember a guy on a different crew who used to heat sand in a metal pot while the cook was still working. He'd stuff the warm grains into cloth pouches and sleep with them down his shirt like little solar batteries. The sand stayed warm for hours, and if you didn't mind the smell, or the occasional scorpion hitchhiker, it worked. Others tried heating stones in the galley fire and wrapping them in canvas. That was trickier, easy to burn yourself, and there was always the risk of dropping a hot stone onto the deck, sparking exactly the kind of fire you were trying to avoid. Still, when your bones were aching and your breath turned to frost, burning your hand didn't seem so bad. There were more questionable methods too. One man used to sleep with a small jar of whale oil under his shirt, said it warmed up against his skin and helped hold the heat. You're not sure it worked, but it definitely made him smell like low tide, and he never got asked to share a hammock. You once tried wrapping yourself in oiled sailcloth, waterproof sure, but also stiff and clammy. You spent the night sweating in your own makeshift sauna, only to wake up colder than before. The moisture had nowhere to go. It just soaked into the cloth and froze the minute you unwrapped it. Lesson learned. And then, of course, there were the truly unhinged ones. You remember a tall, bony crewmate. Thea, they called her, even though no one knew if that was her real name or just short for the agony, who claimed you could stay warm by breathing into a pig bladder and sleeping with it pressed to your chest. She swore by it, said it mimicked the warmth of a sleeping body without the awkwardness of spooning, with a crewmate who smelled like pickled onions and bad decisions. Fringe historians love stories like that. They dig into the more obscure texts, scraps of journals, mismatched logs, and point to these strange little solutions as signs of innovation in the face of madness. One theory, almost certainly false but wildly entertaining, suggests that some pirates tried to line the inside of their boots with dried jellyfish, using the natural insulation of the creature's gooey remains. You want to laugh at the idea, but honestly, if someone handed you a jellyfish right now and told you it would keep your toes from going numb, you'd stuff it in your sock without hesitation. The truth is, fire was simply too risky. A single ember could spark a disaster that no amount of seawater could fix. It wasn't just the sails, though those would go up like paper. It was the powder stores, the barrels of gunpowder stashed in the lower hold, the fuses, the flints, the resin used to waterproof the deck. It was all a fire waiting to happen, and even the most rum-addled crew member knew it. So you slept cold. You learned to layer, to huddle, to use your own breath like a furnace, and when that wasn't enough, you muttered curses at the sea and told yourself you were stronger than it. Tonight, after the scare, you lie awake longer than usual. Your hands are warm from the firefighting, but everything else has gone numb again. You pull your coat tighter, nose buried in the collar, eyes darting in the dark for the glow of embers that might have been missed. You think of warmth like a dream now, something distant and golden and faintly impossible, like a memory from a life before this one. But there's a kind of power in not needing fire, in outlasting the cold without it. You become something tougher, something harder to kill. Eventually your eyes close, you sleep. And if you dream of fire, it's not the kind that burns. It's the kind that flickers in a hearth far away, warming hands you might never hold again. You wake up to the sound of someone farting directly into a wooden barrel. At least, that's what it sounds like. A long, echoing, unrepentant trumpet of a thing. Then the snoring kicks in again, as if nothing happened. No one even reacts anymore. That's pirate life for you. Your senses are so numbed by cold, exhaustion, and questionable stew that even flatulence loses its power. You peel yourself upright slowly like meat separating from bone, and your shoulder crackles in protest. You barely slept, again. Not because of the cold this time, or at least not entirely. It was the sound, the smell, the presence. You were packed in shoulder to shoulder last night, jammed against two other crewmates and a cannon, one of whom talks in his sleep and the other who smells like pickled garlic and whatever died inside his boots 3 weeks ago. And every time you started to drift off, one of them would twitch, roll, snore, or shift and jab an elbow into your ribs. Sleeping on a pirate ship wasn't just cold, it was social warfare. You never quite get used to it, trying to find rest in a floating dormitory of armed, unwashed degenerates. There are no walls, no curtains, no doors to shut out the world, just shared space, layered smells, and the slow realization that privacy is a luxury you left behind on the dock. And it's not just the noise or the stink, it's who you're next to. Pirate ships were democratic in their own chaotic way. You all took your meals together, hauled sails together, fought side by side when it came down to it. But at night, when everything was still, you could feel the tension that never quite went away. That guy you shared a blanket with tonight might be planning to cut your throat by morning if he finds out you cheated at dice last week. The quartermaster snoring softly 3 feet away once threatened to hang you by your belt loops, and you've definitely got at least one crewmate who hides fish bones under your bedding as a joke. It's not a good setup for restful sleep. You remember once lying down next to a guy named Avery. Tall, sullen, always sharpening a knife for no clear reason. You hadn't spoken more than 2 words to him in a month, but that night, with nowhere else to sleep and the cold biting like a dog, you ended up spooned against him like old friends. He didn't say anything, just grunted once and adjusted the shared blanket. You both pretended it was normal. The next day, he threw a crate at your head during an argument about rum rations. Welcome to the tightrope act of sleeping next to enemies. It wasn't always enemies, of course. Sometimes you ended up next to friends, or at least people you could stand. Those nights were better. Still noisy, still smelly, but with a certain level of trust that allowed your muscles to unclench for a few precious hours. The body knows when it's safe, or at least safer, and even a little safety is enough to let you drift deeper than usual. There were unspoken rules to it too. You didn't talk at night unless it was to whisper an apology for stealing someone's foot space. You didn't move suddenly, and under no circumstances did you mention anyone snoring, drooling, or unconscious twitching. These weren't just rules, they were acts of self-preservation. Break them, and you might wake up without eyebrows. Of course, not all conflict was unspoken. You've seen men brawl over sleeping arrangements like it was life or death. A hammock stolen, a blanket pulled too far to one side, elbow room denied. That's all it took. Suddenly fists were flying, someone's tooth bounced off the deck, and everyone else either watched with interest or pretended to be asleep. You once saw 2 men fight with wooden spoons over who got the warmer corner near the salt beef barrel. They both lost. The corner was infested with fleas, and someone dumped stew on their heads during the scuffle. Tensions ran especially high after long days at sea with no sign of land. Everyone's nerves frayed. The jokes got sharper, the laughter got thinner, and sleep, already in short supply, became even harder to come by. Pirate ships didn't have assigned bunks. You found space where you claimed it like a wild animal staking territory. and hoped no one else wanted it more. Some men slept curled around barrels. Others tried wedging themselves between crates or under hammocks, hoping no one would step on them during the night. You did what you had to. There's a fringe theory out there, one of those bold scholarly guesses, that some pirate crews intentionally shuffled sleeping arrangements to avoid cliques or mutinous plotting. It's not confirmed, and it sounds a bit too organised for the average pirate crew, but who knows? Maybe some captains knew that keeping enemies close, literally pressed together in their socks, made them less likely to slit each other's throats. The reality, though, is that sleep was transactional. If you got an extra hour, a better spot, a blanket that didn't smell like despair, it was probably because you traded something for it. Food, watch duty, a favour, protection. Warmth was currency, but so was space, and the more trusted you were, the better you slept. You think of the old quartermaster, Red Tom, who used to sleep upright in a corner with his back to the wall and a knife across his chest. Never said why. Probably didn't have to. He once told you, trust isn't a blanket you wrap yourself in, it's a rat you hold by the tail. You're still not sure what that meant, but he always got the quietest spot, and no one snored near him. Tonight your space is squeezed between Dunn and someone you only know as Mouse, a silent man with sharp eyes and a suspicious number of rings. You don't like him. He smells like vinegar and talks to himself when he thinks no one's listening. But he's warm and he doesn't move much in his sleep. That's good enough. You lay down, back to one, knees touching another, arms folded tight. No one says a word. The boat rocks softly. Someone coughs. Someone mutters a prayer. Then the hold goes quiet again, filled with the subtle symphony of discomfort and mutual tolerance. You close your eyes and let yourself drift, careful not to let your hand brush Mouse's leg. You may not be friends, but you both want the same thing tonight. 1 hour of sleep without violence. And sometimes that's all it takes to call a truce. It starts as a faint gurgle in your stomach. Not loud enough for anyone else to hear, but unmistakable. A low, swampy sound that promises nothing good. You shift slightly, curled up between two crewmates who both smell like boiled eggs left too long in the sun, and try to ignore it. But your gut has other plans. A moment later, it lurches again, this time with a pressure that makes your jaw clench and your eyes water. You groan quietly and roll onto your side, hoping the movement will somehow settle the internal revolt brewing within. Too late. You've caught it. Shipboard stomach. Or, as the crew affectionately calls it, gut rot, belly mutiny, or the salted biscuit shuffle. Whatever you name it, the result is the same. Your body has officially declared war on your insides, and tonight's sleep is about to become a waking nightmare. This isn't new. The combination of hardtack, salt pork, fermented vegetables, and suspicious stews is a digestive time bomb. The food on board isn't just bland. It's an experiment in biological warfare. There are meals where you can't tell if the meat was cooked or if it simply gave up on life. You've had biscuits that crumbled into dust and others so hard they chipped a man's tooth. The cheese glows faintly in the dark, and the pickles, they fight back. You've learned to accept a certain level of nausea as part of pirate life, like the way the ocean air makes your lips crack, or how your boots never fully dry. But sometimes, when the wrong combination of bad meat and rolling waves hits, it's no longer background noise. It's all-consuming. You sit up slowly, hugging your knees, trying to breathe through it. Around you, the rest of the crew snores and mumbles in their sleep, oblivious to your intestinal crisis. You spot a bucket a few feet away, the communal just-in-case bucket, a humble, splintery vessel of last resort. It's already half full. You look at it, then away, then back again. Your stomach lurches. Decision made. You scramble toward it, barefoot, weaving between legs and hammocks, and just barely make it in time. What comes out is a violent mess of everything you ate in the past 2 days, and possibly a few regrets from last year. The sound alone makes someone stir in the dark and groan, "Not again," before rolling over. When it's over, you slump beside the bucket, dizzy and shivering. Your throat burns, your head pounds, your stomach aches from the heaving. You're cold, soaked in sweat, and somehow still itchy. The worst part, you're wide awake now and you know sleep isn't coming back anytime soon. This isn't even your worst night. You remember a storm off the coast of Wales, waves pounding the deck, wind howling like a choir of angry ghosts. Half the crew was seasick for 3 days. No one slept. No one even tried. It was just bodies retching over the side, groaning into their hammocks, or lying flat on the deck trying to trick their brains into believing they were on dry land. Seasickness doesn't care how tough you are. You could be the saltiest old dog on the ship, and a sudden shift in the wind could have you clutching the rail like a drunk, holding on to the last piece of a dream. And once the nausea sets in, everything else follows. Headache, chills, weakness, and that floating half-drunk sensation that makes sleep feel like a cruel joke. Some pirates had cures, or claimed to. You've seen men chew ginger root, suck on lemons, or press mint leaves behind their ears like that would change anything. Others drank heavily before bed, hoping the alcohol would numb them enough to pass out before the waves did their worst. Some just curled up near the centre of the ship, where the motion was less severe, and tried to ride it out like a bad hangover. Then there were the dreams. Oh, the dreams. Food sickness, seasickness, stress, dehydration. They all team up to create the most vivid, bizarre sleep hallucinations you'll ever experience. You once dreamed your hammock turned into a giant tongue that tried to swallow you. Another time, you dreamed you were stuck inside a barrel of pickled onions, screaming while everyone on deck argued about which part of you to eat first. These fever dreams aren't just weird, they're exhausting. You wake up more tired than when you went to sleep, heart racing, soaked in sweat, convinced you're still being chased by a talking rat with your face. The mind, when left to stew in spoiled pork and paranoia, is not kind. Scholars rarely talk about this part of pirate life. They'll mention the food shortages, sure, and they'll nod at the diseases, scurvy, dysentery, typhus. But no one wants to dwell on the nightly horror of trying to sleep while your body turns inside out. And yet, if you talk to any sailor who's lived it, they'll all say the same thing. Sleep isn't about comfort, it's about survival. You glance at your sleeping spot. It's still there, barely warmed, next to Dunn's elbow and Mouse's questionable boots. The thought of crawling back under the tarp makes your stomach roll again. Instead, you sit with your back against a barrel, arms wrapped around your knees, and try to focus on breathing slowly. It's moments like this that make you question the whole pirate thing. You could have been a carpenter, a baker, even a rat catcher. But no, you chose the sea, the promise of gold, freedom, adventure. And now you're crouched beside a puke bucket, praying the ship stops moving long enough for your stomach to calm down. Eventually your head starts to nod. Not quite sleep, more like exhaustion's slow embrace. You drift in and out, jolted every time the ship rolls or a crewmate snores too loudly. Your dreams, when they come, are scattered. Fish with human teeth, a stew that screams, an endless hallway made of hammocks and screaming goats. You'll laugh about it later. You always do. Because what else can you do? You wipe your mouth with your sleeve, take a swig of stale water, and brace yourself for another day. Because no matter how sick you are, how bad the dreams get, how foul the stew is, you've still got to climb the rigging, hoist the sails, and maybe, just maybe, try to sleep again tomorrow night, if your stomach lets you. The rum tonight is strong, too strong, the kind that burns all the way down and somehow still manages to crawl back up for another round. You're sitting cross-legged near the foremast with a battered tin cup in your hand, swirling the dark liquid like it's fine wine instead of whatever passed for pirate spirits this week. The first mate calls it blackwater grog. Most just call it sleep in a cup. And in a way, that's exactly what it is. Rum aboard a pirate ship isn't just tradition. It's ritual, medicine, comfort, escape. You sip it when the cold's in your bones. You swig it after a fight, before a storm, after a funeral, or instead of dinner when the biscuits go green and the pork starts crawling on its own. But more than anything, you drink it before trying to sleep. Because if there's one thing that can dull the edge of freezing wood, snoring crewmates, and the smell of 30 men stuffed into a leaking hull, it's a stiff pull of fermented molasses and wishful thinking. You take another sip. It numbs your lips, warms your throat. A fake warmth, sure, but after 3 weeks of frozen socks and waking up with ice crusting your eyebrows, you'll take what you can get. It's a funny thing, though. You'd think with the way pirates drank, they'd all be unconscious by sundown. But most of the time, rum isn't used to party. It's used to cope, to force your brain to shut off, to override the discomfort, the itch, the ache, and that familiar buzzing in your skull that comes from being exhausted but too wired to rest. You remember your first time drinking before sleep. You were new to the crew, still green, still flinching every time the sails cracked overhead. The nights were rough, You'd lie awake for hours, every sound a threat, every creak a sign of the ship falling apart, every breath from the guy next to you 1 second too long. The cold kept you awake, but so did your own thoughts. Then someone, might have been Rat-Faced Jim or Toothless Sarah, shoved a cup of rum into your hands and said, "Drink this. It'll punch your dreams quiet." You did, and it worked. Sort of. The rum doesn't give you good sleep, it gives you deep sleep. Heavy. Blank. Like sinking into a black ocean with no bottom. You don't dream. You just disappear for a few hours. And when you wake up, the pain's still there, the cold's still chewing your fingers, and someone's probably yelling already. But at least you had those hours of not being aware of it. Not everyone handles rum the same, though. Some men drink too much and sleep like corpses. Others wake up confused and combative, swinging at shadows. You once saw a man try to fight a sack of potatoes, convinced it had insulted his mother. He passed out mid-swing, head landing squarely in the stew pot. The cook just served around him. Then there are the night drinkers, the ones who get quiet and strange when the rum hits. They stare at nothing, mumble names, weep without sound. They drink to forget, and sometimes it works. Sometimes they get an hour or two of peace, but other times, well, the forgetting doesn't last. They wake up screaming. Or not at all. You've heard the debates. Some scholars say pirates were barely functioning alcoholics, drinking themselves stupid every night. Others argue that the rum was rationed, used sparingly and with purpose. Truth is, it probably depended on the ship, the crew and the day. Some captains encouraged moderate drinking, knowing it helped morale. Others were stricter, keeping the grog locked up until the work was done. And then there were the ones who drank with the crew, collapsing into the same vomit-stained hammocks when the bottle ran dry. Tonight things are quiet. The storm passed 2 days ago, the sails are holding, and no one's died in at least 24 hours, which qualifies as peace in pirate terms, so the rum's flowing a little freer, passed around in dented cups and chipped mugs. You see Dunn swaying near the steps, grinning like he's forgotten what toes feel like. Grady's passed out flat on his back with one boot on, and the other still in his hand. Mouse is sharpening a knife, sipping occasionally and muttering to himself. As usual, you finish your cup and lean back, letting the warmth spread through your limbs. It doesn't last long. The cold finds you again. It always does. But the rum softens the edges, makes the boards feel less like a coffin and more like a cradle. You settle into your usual spot, wedged between a barrel of tack biscuits and a sack of damp wool, and let your coat fall across your chest. The grog's in full effect now. Your muscles go soft, your jaw slackens, you feel yourself slipping. And here's the trick, don't fight it. If you try to hold on, stay half awake, you'll just make it worse. Let the rum take you, let the waves rock you, let the creaking ship hum its lullaby. Because for now, in this narrow moment, you're not cold, you're not tired, you're not trapped on a ship with half-mad thieves and a bucket for a toilet. You're just gone. Of course, there's always a price. You'll wake up with your tongue stuck to the roof of your mouth and a headache that feels like someone stuffed gunpowder in your skull. Your joints will ache, your stomach might revolt, but those are problems for morning you. Tonight you just wants to sleep. You drift down, deeper and deeper, the world narrowing to a tunnel of flickering candlelight and muffled snores. And in that final moment before you fall completely, you whisper a quiet, rum-fueled prayer to whatever gods might be listening. Let the rats stay quiet. Let no one steal your boots. And please, for just a few hours, don't let the cold win. You wake with a gasp, heart pounding, sweat freezing instantly on your neck, and for one terrifying second you don't remember where you are. The deck overhead groans, the ship shifts slightly. You blink, confused, your breath catching in your throat, eyes straining in the dark, and then it all rushes back. Your hammock, your crewmates, the bucket someone probably kicked over during the night. But more than anything, you remember the dream. Or maybe it wasn't a dream. There's something about sleeping at sea that blurs the line between dreams and hallucinations, between memory and nightmare, especially when you're on a ship full of men who believe the ocean listens, who believe she whispers, who swear that certain parts of the ship are colder for a reason, and that some hammocks creak even when no one's lying in them. You've heard it since your first week aboard, the whispers, the stories, the strange looks when someone mentions sleeping near the forward hold, the knowing nods when someone wakes up screaming and says, "I saw her again." Everyone just accepts it. They may laugh and shrug during the day, but once night falls and the lanterns go dim, superstition creeps into every corner like a tide you can't hold back. Tonight, it was the woman in the waves. You saw her. clear as anything, hair like seaweed, skin pale and smooth like bone, her eyes wide and black like a squid's. She didn't speak. She just reached up from the water, her fingers brushing the hull, and looked straight at you. No malice, no smile, just a deep, aching stillness. You didn't move, couldn't, and when you finally woke, you were cold from the inside out. You glance around the hold. The others are sleeping, some twitching, some murmuring. One guy's eyes are open, staring at the ceiling. You're not sure if he's awake or just stuck in something. Either way, you look away. Sleep on a pirate ship is strange like that. When it finally comes, it's never peaceful. It's too layered. You've got exhaustion, rum, fear, cold, the rhythmic motion of the ship, and the endless echoing groans of the timbers around you. It's the perfect recipe for dreams that don't play fair. And sometimes, just sometimes, they feel like more than dreams. There's a long-standing superstition that ships absorb the souls of those who die aboard them. That every man tossed overboard, every woman hanged from the mast, every child drowned at port leaves behind something. A whisper, a shadow. A breath in the dark that doesn't belong to anyone living. You've heard stories of hammocks that kill, spots on deck where men slip no matter how careful they are, barrels that seem to shift when no one's near them. Some of the crew won't sleep near the powder hold. Others avoid the starboard side entirely. You once met a guy who slept in the galley every night, claiming the stove kept the ghosts away. It didn't. But at least it was warm. Fringe historians love this stuff. They pore over ship logs, looking for patterns. Men who died in their sleep, repeated reports of nightmares, even mentions of the woman in the water. They argue over whether these are just metaphors, stress-induced dreams, or evidence of some collective psychological phenomenon. You don't bother with theories. All you know is that too many people on this ship have seen the same things, and that makes you wonder. You try to shake it off. Dreams don't mean anything. It's just your brain running laps around your fears. You're cold. You're tired. Of course your mind dredged up something awful. But then you notice something strange. Your boots have been moved. You always keep them tucked near your head, laces knotted together. Habit. Tonight, they're 2 feet away, separated, one turned on its side. Maybe someone kicked them. Maybe the ship shifted. But maybe... You push the thought down. No one wants to talk about the bad dreams because once you speak them, they tend to come back worse. It's an unwritten rule. You can drink. You can curse. You can even cry if you're quiet about it. But don't talk about the dreams. There's one crew member, old Cohen, who once broke the rule. Swore he saw a drowned child walking the lower deck at night. Said he heard its footsteps. Saw the wet prints. Everyone told him to shut up, to stop tempting fate. He kept talking, kept insisting. A week later he vanished during night watch. No splash, no scream. Just gone. Some say he jumped. Others whisper the child took him. Either way, his hammock's still empty. No one sleeps in it. Not because it's cursed, officially. But no one volunteers either. You lie back, adjusting your scarf, pulling it tighter over your nose. The dream is still clinging to you like mist. Your skin crawls. You can't stop thinking about those eyes. That silent reaching hand. You've had bad dreams before, but this one felt aware. And there's the rub, isn't it? Out here, surrounded by nothing but water and wood, your brain starts to feel watched. You can't tell what's real anymore. The sea talks. The wood talks. Sometimes even your own thoughts seem to have voices that aren't yours. And always the ship creaks. That sound, so constant you usually stop hearing it, suddenly seems louder, more deliberate, like footsteps. You sit up again, heart hammering. Nothing there. Just Dunn twitching in his sleep and Mouse chewing in his dreams. Still, the feeling doesn't leave. Some say the ship chooses who sleeps and who doesn't, that it watches you, tests you, and when you finally let your guard down, it reaches out. Just a whisper, just a touch. You lie back slowly, this time facing the hull. You close your eyes and count your breaths. You tell yourself it's just your mind, just the grog, just the long shadows of too many sleepless nights. You repeat the lie until you almost believe it, and eventually sleep drags you under again. But this time, you don't dream. You listen. The first thing that hits you when you wake is the smell. Not the usual sharp blend of sweat, rope, damp wood, and a hint of fish, but something richer, more offensive. It floods your nostrils before you even open your eyes. It's everywhere. Thick, wet, sentient almost. You blink yourself awake and immediately regret it. The air down here has turned into a full-body assault, as if someone brewed soup from old boots and left it in the sun for a week. You sit up, pulling your scarf away from your face and immediately pulling it back again. It's worse than usual. You've spent enough nights curled up on this ship to get used to the baseline stink, but this is new territory. You glance around the hold. No one else looks surprised. Just pinched noses, squinting eyes, and grumbling acceptance. The smell is winning. Again. Down below deck, smell is its own entity. It doesn't just exist. It clings. Sinks into the fibres of your clothes, into your hair, your skin. If hell has a foyer, it probably smells a lot like the lower deck of a pirate ship halfway through a 6-week voyage with no fresh food and no rain. It's like a living museum of body odours, each man's contribution preserved in the stale, unmoving air. You stagger to your feet and immediately step in something suspiciously warm. Your brain refuses to identify it. You hop backward, heels slamming into a bucket that tips over with a slosh. The smell intensifies. You gag. This is why sleep is never deep, never clean, because you're always one mystery puddle or surprise rat away from being wide awake. You don't have the luxury of relaxation. You sleep in defense mode, half conscious, one eye metaphorically open, ears trained for footsteps, creaks, or the ominous splash of something that used to be edible falling off a shelf. You walk toward the hatch to get some air, carefully stepping over Dunn, who's curled up next to a sack of onions, or at least you hope those are onions. Mouse is still asleep, mouth wide open, snoring through his nose, which seems like an act of bravery in this air. You make it to the ladder and climb quickly, the rush of cold night air hitting your face like a slap. It's a relief. It's also freezing. But you inhale deeply anyway, filling your lungs with air that doesn't taste like feet and salted meat. Almost makes the frostbite worth it. The problem with smells below deck isn't just the men, it's the everything. The ship is a patchwork of rotting food stores, animal pens, human filth, fish guts, mould, and whatever died behind the powder barrel 6 days ago and hasn't been retrieved because no one wants to deal with it. It doesn't help that nothing ever dries. Clothes stay wet, blankets go sour, even the wood itself smells like old teeth. You once tried hanging your shirt up to air out. After 3 days it smelled worse. The moisture just fermented whatever bacteria was already there into something resembling pickled regret. The food contributes its fair share too. Salt pork rots slower, but it does rot. The brine helps preserve it, sure, but by preserve, we mean slowly decompose in a way that's legally edible. There are barrels full of fish that were already questionable when loaded onto the ship, and now seem to have developed their own ecosystem. The pickled vegetables are often indistinguishable from the barrel brine, and no matter how strong your stomach is, one whiff of opened fish oil at 3 a.m. will have you contemplating your life choices. Then there's the human element. No one bathes, not properly. Water is rationed, rain is random, soap is a fantasy. You rinse your face with seawater if you're lucky, but that only leaves you sticky with salt and slightly crusted like an old biscuit. Everyone sweats, constantly. And when the cold hits, you don't stop sweating. You just sweat under 5 layers of wool and canvas and stew yourself like an undercooked dumpling. And where does it all go? Nowhere. It just builds. Layers upon layers. One scent mixing with another until the entire hold smells like a crime scene in a cheese factory. And that's before you factor in the bodily functions no one talks about. The farts, the burps, the unexpected midnight heaves. You've heard someone vomit in their sleep and roll over like it was nothing. You've seen men wake up, stretch and urinate into a corner before stumbling above deck without blinking. And that's the routine nights. You remember one particularly bad voyage, crossing the North Sea in early winter. The cold didn't kill the smell. It preserved it, froze it into the walls. Every time someone stomped across the deck above, little flakes of crusted grime would fall like snow. The rats got bold. One climbed into someone's boot and died there, rotting quietly until it was discovered by accident in the middle of the night with an unforgettable squelch. Some pirates tried to fight back. They'd hang sachets of dried herbs near their hammocks, lavender, mint, anything they could loot from a passing cargo ship. Others burned scraps of scented wax near the galley when the wind was right. You tried stuffing garlic in your coat once. It didn't help. It just made you smell like spiced misery. There's even an old superstition about it, that if the ship starts smelling sweet, unnaturally sweet, it means someone's going to die soon. A kind of death mist perfume. One guy swore he smelled roses the night before the mizzenmast collapsed and crushed 2 men. Another claimed to smell cinnamon before a cannon misfired and took out his bunkmate's foot. Fringe historians have suggested that chronic exposure to these extreme smells could lead to hallucinations, that pirates, already low on sleep and high on rum, started seeing things not just because of the sea or the stories, but because they were slowly being poisoned by their own ship. Mold spores, rotten meat fumes, psychological overload. It's not far-fetched. Not when you've woken up convinced your shirt is moving and it turns out it was, but only because something small and legged decided to share your warmth. You glance back down the hatch now, breathing the crisp night air like it's a gift. You'll have to go back down soon. Sleep still needs stealing, but for now you linger. Just one more moment of clean lungs and non-sentient air. You know you'll adjust. You always do. The smell becomes background eventually. You forget what normal smells like. You stop wrinkling your nose. You stop noticing that your fingers always carry a faint scent of onion, rope, and mystery grease. Eventually it just smells like home. A very damp, questionably hygienic, and possibly cursed home, but home nonetheless. It starts with the wind, shifting directions like a moody drunk. No warning, just a sudden snap of the sails and a hollow thump somewhere in the rigging. Then the ship lists slightly to starboard. Not much, just enough to spill a tin mug off a crate and send it rolling in a slow arc across the deck. You glance up from your post near the forward hold. A few others have noticed too. Heads turn, boots scrape. The quiet rustling of worry begins to ripple through the ship, and then, like a match to kindling, it hits. The first wave slaps the hull hard enough to rattle your teeth. The second knocks you into a coil of rope, and before you can stand again, the sky opens its throat and howls. The sea, gentle just moments ago, now climbs like a wall around you. Wind tears through the rigging, flinging icy spray through every gap in the deck. Lightning flashes far off to port, followed by a slow, ominous rumble. A storm is here. Forget your watch. Forget your plans to sleep. No one sleeps through this. Everyone's moving now. The shout goes out. All hands! As boots slam the planks and bodies rush to their posts. You scramble to the rigging, grabbing whatever lines haven't been torn loose by the first gust. The rain comes in sideways, cold, mean and relentless. It's not just weather, it's punishment, and it's only getting worse. The ship is alive beneath you, groaning, bucking, twisting like it's trying to shake you off. Every surface is slick, every step is a gamble. You grip the rigging tight and haul with the others, shouting to be heard over the wind. The sails snap like thunder. Somewhere behind you a crate crashes into the bulkhead and shatters. You don't look back, you don't need to. You've been through storms before, but this one's different. This one's personal. It feels like the sea wants to remind you who's boss, and all you can think is, there's no way anyone's getting sleep tonight. Once the worst of the sail work is done, you're ordered below, mostly to get out of the way of the veterans who know how to keep the ship from flipping into Davy Jones's soup bowl. But below deck is no better. It's darker, wetter, louder. Everything rocks. Everything moves. Water seeps in from places you didn't know existed. Buckets slide. Hammocks swing wildly, some even flipping entirely, dumping their unfortunate occupants onto the floor like overturned beetles. You make your way through the hold, crouched low to keep from smashing your head against a beam. The motion is dizzying. Left, right, up, down, all at once. You slip, catch yourself on a barrel and get a nice splash of cold stew across your leg. Delicious. And just when you think it can't get worse, someone vomits, loudly, nearby. You sit down hard in the narrow space near the midship beam, back pressed to the hull, knees to your chest. No one speaks. Everyone's just holding on, hands clutching wood, eyes wide, lips moving in silent prayers to gods they don't usually believe in. The hold smells like fear, sweat, and everything that didn't stay down. You can hear the storm outside, above, all around, the angry thrash of waves, the shriek of the wind through the gaps in the planks, the sickening creak of a mast that might at any moment snap. Sleep during a storm is more myth than possibility. You might pass out from exhaustion, sure, but actual rest, not happening. Every time your eyelids droop, the ship jerks violently and your spine knocks against the wood. Someone shouts. Something crashes. A wave smashes against the hull with enough force to shake the nails loose. You're awake. Again. Every time. And the fear doesn't help. Fear keeps you sharp, keeps you alive, but it also keeps you awake. Because deep down, every sailor knows, sleep in a storm is a risk. It's letting your guard down when the sea might just reach through the hull and snatch you out of your hammock like a rag doll. And even if you're not superstitious, it's hard not to feel like something's watching you in the dark, waiting for you to close your eyes. You think back to a storm last year, when the mainmast cracked in half and crushed a quarter of the deck crew. It was chaos, men screaming, rain pouring, blood on the planks, and someone shrieking that the sea had come to collect its due. You didn't sleep for 3 nights after that. Every time you tried, you heard that snap, that awful wooden snap. Historians argue over whether pirates were really tougher than other sailors, or just louder. But even they agree, storms were an equalizer. Navy men, merchant sailors, pirates, everyone feared a ship-cracking tempest. Because when the waves are taller than your masts and the wind sounds like it's laughing, all the gold in the world won't help you. Some of the older pirates, the ones with eyes like iron nails, claim they can sleep through storms. One bragged once that he once slept through a hurricane while dangling from a snapped boom, snoring the whole time, but everyone knows he's lying, or mad, probably both. The real veterans don't boast. They just close their eyes and wait. Not for sleep, but for it to be over. They rock with the motion of the ship, muttering old sailor chants under their breath. Not quite prayers, not quite songs, just noise, repetition, something to keep the fear at bay. You find yourself doing it now, soft, mindless humming. Some old tune your mother used to sing. It calms you just enough to unclench your jaw. Your back still hurts. Your hands are numb. But the fear eases a fraction. Eventually, hours in, the storm begins to tire. The shrieking wind dips to a groan. The waves don't hit as hard. The ship stops sounding like it's about to rip apart. Just a little. Just enough. You don't even realize you've nodded off until your chin hits your chest. Just a few minutes, maybe 20. But it's the kind of sleep born of total exhaustion. Heavy, black, dreamless. When you wake, you're no more rested than before, but at least your brain's shut down for a while. And as the storm limps off into the distance and dawn begins to claw its way over the sea, you stretch your aching limbs and sigh. You didn't sleep well, but you survived the night. And on a pirate ship, sometimes that's the better option anyway. You wake up to sunlight, and for a moment you don't recognize it. The light's so soft and golden, slipping down through the cracks in the hatch like a gentle apology, that your first instinct is suspicion. After nights of storms, screams, and the general human stew that passes for air below deck, it's unsettling to see the world bathed in something as forgiving as morning. You blink a few times, checking for movement above, half expecting another shout or a fresh disaster. But no, the ship is quiet. Not dead quiet, just calm. That rare in-between hum of a crew sleeping off a rough night and the ocean finally letting you breathe. You stretch, cautiously, one vertebra at a time, groaning as your back reminds you it's been curled in the shape of a question mark for the better part of a week. But you're warm, for once. Not because of any miracle heating system, just body heat, a layer of breath-dampened wool, and the mercy of a rising sun. Mouse is drooling next to you, still muttering to himself in some dream, while Dun's blanket has half slid off, revealing toes that look like something the ocean chewed up and spat out. You nudge the blanket back over him. You're not sentimental. You just don't want to see the feet again. You push yourself upright and shuffle toward the ladder, careful not to trip over anything soft or snoring or both. Climbing up into the morning is like emerging from another life, one where warmth, clarity and silence are myths whispered in the stink pit below. Topside, the air is brisk but not brutal. The sails flap lazily, catching light winds. The deck glistens from the storm's leftovers, but it's the kind of wet that dries fast in the sun. You squint against the light and take a deep breath, the salt tang mixing with something new, clean. Not quite fresh, but cleaner than you've known in weeks. And for the first time in what feels like a lifetime, you let yourself consider the possibility of sleeping outside. It's a rare treat, not something the captain encourages. Sleeping on deck means more chances of getting trampled, rolled overboard, or peed on by a half-awake crew member making a mistake in the dark. But after a night like last night, no one's arguing. You spot 3 crewmates already flopped against the gunwale like lazy seals, eyes closed, basking. One of them has a chicken sleeping on his chest. You find a spot in the shade of a coil of spare rope and lay yourself down gently, like you're handling your own bones for the first time. It's not warm exactly, but it's dry. The boards are rough under your spine, but the breeze is soft and the light is golden and you don't smell a single human foot. Out here, under open sky, you realise how suffocating the hold has become. The damp air, the unspoken tension, the endless parade of smells. But up here, there's space. The sky stretches on forever. The sails above you flutter like giant wings, creaking rhythmically, and for a minute or two you can pretend you're not on a death trap loaded with spoiled pork and questionable alliances. You can pretend this is peace. Some pirates slept on deck as often as they could. There are records, scattered and vague, of hammocks strung between masts, of woolen cloaks wrapped tight around sleeping figures under the stars. Captains didn't like it. It looked too casual, too civilian. But sailors knew the truth. Above deck, the air moved. And when the air moves, the mind rests. You close your eyes and listen. No snoring and no coughing, no distant sound of someone relieving themselves in the wrong corner. Just the low groan of the ship, the flap of canvas, and the occasional squawk of the ship's single, half-plucked parrot, who apparently only knows how to say bugger off and where's me sock. You drift. Not all the way, not yet. But enough that your thoughts begin to soften. Your breathing evens. Your muscles melt into the sun-warmed wood. And in that fragile space between waking and sleep, your mind does what pirate minds always do. It wanders. You remember sleeping on the beach once before you joined the crew, a fire nearby, sand cool beneath your back, the smell of roasted fish, someone singing a tune off-key. You didn't know then that it would be the last time you'd sleep with a full belly and no weapon tucked under your coat. Back then, sleep was easy, taken for granted. Now it's a battle, every night, every time. But this morning, just for a moment, it feels less like a fight. You hear a footstep nearby, light, deliberate. You crack one eye open and see the quartermaster walking past, casting a glance your way. He doesn't stop you, doesn't bark, just keeps moving. He knows what last night cost. You close your eyes again. There's a debate among certain historians, mostly those who like their history a little too tidy, that pirates couldn't possibly have lived long with the conditions they endured. The food, the hygiene, the injuries, the sleeplessness, it should have broken them faster. Some argue that the stories we have are exaggerated, romanticised. They think pirates were less brutal, more structured, cleaner, healthier, less filth and fury, more rowdy seafaring entrepreneurs. Those historians have clearly never tried to nap on a damp rope coil while listening for signs of mutiny. Because it's not about whether the pirates survived well, it's that they survived anyway. They adapted, found sleep where they could, in corners, under barrels, draped across cannon mounts. One guy on your ship sleeps with his head in a bucket and says it muffles the voices. You haven't asked what voices, you're not sure you want to know, but you understand him. Because when sleep is rare, you get creative. You take what you can. You learn to sleep like a cat, one eye open, ready to bolt at the slightest change in the wind. You learn to nap in 2-minute bursts, rocked by the sea, heart still half clenched with alertness. And sometimes, like this morning, when the stars align and the sea is gentle and no one's bleeding, you get lucky. You get real sleep. Your breathing slows again, you sink, and for a little while, no more than an hour maybe, you rest. Not because it's easy, but because it's finally allowed. You wake to the sensation of something brushing against your cheek, soft, feathery, and very much alive. Instinct kicks in. You flinch, swat wildly, and hear an indignant squawk followed by the rapid flapping of wings. The half-plucked parrot, offended and possibly plotting revenge, takes off into the rigging, screeching, "Bugger off!" like you insulted its grandmother. A few crewmates chuckle sleepily nearby. You blink against the midday sun, feeling the crust of dried salt clinging to your lips and the familiar weight of regret settling on your lower back. Still, not a bad way to wake up, all things considered. You sit up slowly, your shoulders ache. Your neck's been kinked into the shape of a question mark again, but it's nothing you haven't dealt with before. You stretch, arms above your head, and listen to the chorus of creaks, groans, and gas passing that signal the rest of the crew waking up too. You can already tell it's going to be a slow day. The ship rocks gently beneath you, caught in the kind of calm swell that sailors both bless and curse. No wind, but also no storms. Nothing urgent. just a slow drift across a glassy sea that glitters like a puddle of melted coins. These are the days that drag, the days where time stretches out like taffy, sticky and slow, and every minute feels like an hour. And these are also the days when sleep is hardest to find, because when you're busy, hauling sails, fighting storms, outrunning naval frigates, you fall into bed like a corpse, sleep hitting you before you've even finished swearing about the cold. But when there's nothing to do, when the air's too still and the sea's too quiet and your own thoughts start getting loud, that's when sleep gets tricky. You wander the deck in your usual slow shuffle, stretching your legs and trying not to step in anything fresh. You see Dunn playing dice with himself, probably cheating. Mouse is asleep again somehow, curled up like a shrimp near the base of the mainmast, and a couple of the younger crew are lounging near the galley, talking low and lazy about the last port they visited, and a barmaid who may or may not have had a moustache. You lean on the railing, staring out at nothing. The horizon's flat as a blade. The sun burns high and white, the kind of heat that doesn't warm so much as drain. You can feel it slowly cooking your brain like an egg in its shell. You start thinking about sleep again. Back below deck? Not likely. The hold is a stew pot by midday. The air's so thick you could cut it with a spoon, and every breath tastes like old leather and foot fungus. You could rig a tarp for shade, but the last time you did that, a rat fell from the rigging and landed squarely on your face. No thanks. Instead, you settle near the quarterdeck, in a patch of shadow cast by a sagging sail. You lie back, hat over your eyes, and try to pretend you're anywhere else. But here's the thing, midday sleep is a gamble. The crew's bored, and when pirates get bored, they get creative. You've seen it too many times. A man dozes off near a barrel and wakes up with his eyebrows shaved. Another gets a fish head tucked into his coat and doesn't notice for 2 hours. Someone once nailed a man's boot to the deck while he snored. He didn't even wake until he tried to stand. You've pulled some of those tricks yourself, of course. You're not innocent. But now, lying there, exposed and suspiciously sleepy, you realise how vulnerable you are, which means you don't sleep. Not really. You close your eyes, you breathe slow, you pretend. But your ears stay tuned for laughter, footsteps, or the soft hiss of someone sneaking up with a bucket of something unpleasant. It's not restful, but it's survival. There's a theory, whispered by the older hands and echoed occasionally by fringe scholars, that pirates developed a kind of hypervigilant sleep, a light surface-level rest that allowed the body to recharge without fully shutting down. They compare it to soldiers on the front lines, or animals in the wild, half aware, always listening. Some even claim that pirates learn to nap with one hemisphere of the brain at a time, like dolphins. That one's probably nonsense, but the core idea makes sense. You sleep how you live, ready to run or fight or duck at a moment's notice. You try it now. Let your body go limp. Keep your breathing slow. Let the shade cradle your face. You imagine soft grass, a warm fire, a room with a door that closes, but the moment someone laughs too loudly near the helm, your eyes snap open. Just a prank, nothing serious. Still your heart jumps like it heard a cannon. You sit up, wipe sweat from your brow. Your shirt's already soaked through. No breeze. The sails hang limp like laundry. The sea's too calm. Everything feels off. You scan the horizon again. Nothing. Just the same empty stretch. But the unease lingers. Sometimes it's like that. On days with no wind, no danger and no noise, the quiet feels heavier than battle. You're not the only one feeling it. The rest of the crew's twitchier now, eyes flicking, fingers drumming. Someone starts singing a tune under their breath, just to fill the silence. Another picks up a deck of cards, shuffles it without dealing. Everyone's chasing distraction. Anything but stillness. Because here's the dark truth no one talks about. Pirates didn't want peace. Not really. It made them restless, paranoid. Boredom was dangerous. It bred fights, schemes, nightmares, sleep. The worst fights you've ever seen. Not in storms, not in ports, not after raids. They happened on still days like this, when the air didn't move and everyone started thinking too much. You stand, brushing yourself off, abandoning the idea of rest. Not today. Instead, you head toward the rigging. It's not your shift, but the climbing helps. The wind always feels a little cooler up high, and from the crow's nest, even a fake purpose can keep your mind quiet for a while. You'll try sleeping again later, maybe at dusk when the heat fades and the crew settles. Maybe then, You can drift off without worrying about being shaved, pranked, or stabbed. But for now, you stay awake. Because the sun is too still and the sea is too flat, and sometimes it's the quiet that keeps you from sleeping at all. You haven't slept in 2 days. Not really. Maybe a few minutes here and there, head resting on your knees, eyes fluttering closed between shifts, but nothing deep, nothing restorative. Your limbs feel like they've been filled with wet sand. Your thoughts come in half-formed sentences. You keep forgetting where you left things, your scarf, your boots, your own name for a second back there. It's not just tiredness anymore, it's sleep deprivation, the real kind, the kind that chews on your nerves until your own body starts turning against you. You sit on a crate near the aft deck, hunched over, staring at your hands like they've betrayed you. They're shaking. Not violently, not enough for anyone else to notice, but it's there. That fine, twitchy tremble that comes when you've pushed past the limit. You clench your fists, then release them. The shaking doesn't stop. The light seems too bright, the sky too blue. Every sound is louder than it should be. Every creak of the ship is a warning. You blink and see something at the edge of your vision. A shape, a figure. You turn your head sharply. Nothing's there. Just done, snoring softly with his mouth open and one sock half off. You stare for a long time just to be sure. You're starting to hallucinate, you know it. You're not proud, but it's not uncommon out here. Sleep deprivation is part of the job. Storms, shifts, emergencies, hunger. Anything can rob you of sleep, and once it starts slipping away, it's almost impossible to claw back. The ship keeps moving, the wind keeps blowing, and you keep going, because you have to. You remember stories, rumours really, of pirates who didn't sleep for 4 or 5 days straight and started losing their minds. One guy, on a Dutch crew, supposedly ripped his own fingernails out because he thought spiders were hiding under them. Another was found trying to cook a cannonball over a candle, convinced it was a sea egg full of gold. No one talks much about it, but it's there, under the surface. The slow unravelling of a man's brain when it doesn't get the one thing it needs most. Even the toughest pirates, cutthroats with more scars than teeth, can be undone by a lack of rest. You've seen it. Watched men with 1,000-yard stares sit in silence for hours, mumbling to themselves, flinching at shadows. They weren't weak, just tired. And you're headed down that same road. You try to stand and your knees buckle. You catch yourself on the railing, the rough wood biting into your palms. You close your eyes and sway there, half dreaming, half waking. The breeze whispers something. You know it's just the wind, but for a second you hear your name. You snap your eyes open. This has to stop, but you stagger below deck, searching for a spot, any spot where you can disappear for an hour. The hold is dim, shadows flickering as the ship sways. Most hammocks are full. Dunn's taken his usual corner, curled like a dead beetle. Someone else is stretched out in the galley doorway, drooling on a sack of flour. You find a narrow patch of floor behind a barrel of dried beans. You settle in, pressing your back against the hull, pulling your coat over your knees. It's cold, damp, smells like mildew and wet wool. But it's a spot, and in this moment, that's enough. You close your eyes, breathe in through your nose, slow. You count 1, 2, 3, 4. Out 5, 6, 7. Again. Your mind rebels, starts throwing up images. Random, fast, nonsensical. A goat in a hat, your mother's hands, the feeling of sinking into the sea and not minding. You jerk awake, heart racing. You try again and again. Sleep flirts with you, but won't stay. You drift into semi-consciousness, dreamless, thoughtless, just drifting. And then the ship creaks, or someone coughs, and you're back. You're not sure how long this goes on. Time warps when you're sleep-starved. It might be an hour, it might be 5 minutes. Eventually someone stomps past and kicks your boot. On deck, they grunt. You nod, barely hearing them, and rise. Your body is sore in new ways. Not just muscle ache, inside ache. Like your organs are mad at you. You feel unravelled, like your seams are loose. You can't think straight. You can't see straight. The world tilts more than the ship. You grip the ladder and climb slowly, one rung at a time, like someone learning how hands work. On deck, the sun stabs your eyes like knives. The light is too much, the wind too loud. You hear someone call your name again, but when you look, no one's even looking at you. You laugh, quietly, then louder. Mouse glances at you and raises an eyebrow but says nothing. You sit on a coil of the rope, head in your hands, and try to remember if you've eaten today. or yesterday. You think about trying to sleep again, but it feels impossible, like chasing smoke. A few feet away, one of the younger crew has tucked himself behind a sail bundle, legs crossed, head back, eyes closed. Sleeping, sitting up. You watch him with a mixture of envy and rage. How dare he fall asleep so easily? What pact did he make with the sea? There's an old pirate tale told in low voices about a sailor who never slept, not for months. He was said to be invincible in battle, never tired, never afraid. Then one day he just stopped moving, froze mid-step, eyes open, dead. They say the sleep caught up to him all at once and crushed him, like an avalanche of rest. A warning, the story goes. Don't run from sleep. It always wins. You believe it now, you feel it in your bones. Sleep is no longer a luxury. It's a need, a demand. You can't function, can't think. Your fingers fumble knots. Your mouth forgets words. You're a ghost wearing boots, and the sea is watching. There's talk among some fringe scholars about pirate madness. They argue it wasn't just rum or violence or cabin fever that made pirates unpredictable. It was sleep deprivation. A slow erosion of sanity caused by relentless exhaustion. And the more you think about it, the more sense it makes. Pirates weren't all wild-eyed lunatics. They were tired, always, fighting, sailing, scraping for moments of rest that never really came, living like rats with swords. And tonight you know it's coming again, another night, another battle with your own body, and you don't know if you'll win. But for now you stare at the sea. Its surface glitters in the dying light, calm and endless. You wonder if you could float there. Just lie back and sleep. Real sleep. For the first time in weeks. You wonder if it would feel like drowning. Or dreaming. You blink, long and slow. And the world goes quiet just for a second. Then someone shouts, "You're awake again." Of course. You figured it out, the warmest place on the ship. It's not the hammock you strung up 6 weeks ago that sags in the middle like a spider's web after a fistfight. It's not the corner by the barrels where you once wedged yourself between 2 coils of wet rope and a pile of turnips. No, it's not even under Mouse's coat, which you shared one drunken night and instantly regretted, due to the number of items he stores in his sleeves that definitely shouldn't be that warm. It's here, right here, nestled behind the galley, down by the livestock crate. Yes, the livestock crate. You lower yourself slowly, carefully, onto the lumpy sack of feed that someone, bless their anonymous soul, left there last week and never reclaimed. You're mostly out of the wind. The boards beneath you are dryish, and most importantly, the body heat from the pig next door is radiating through the slats like a blessed furnace forged by the gods of questionable hygiene. You don't care that it smells like hay and faint pork farts. You don't care that your shoulder is brushing against what might be a chicken feather or might be part of Dunn's breakfast from 2 mornings ago. This is it. This is your spot. You've made it. You curl into a half-sit, half-slouch, resting your back against a crate of salted cod and drawing your coat over your chest like some weary monarch finally sitting on his throne. You let out a long breath, more like a sigh really, the kind you only make when you know, deep down, you've found a piece of comfort in the chaos. Sleep doesn't come immediately, it never does, but your body relaxes just a little, enough that your heartbeat stops sounding like someone drumming on a barrel. The pig grunts softly on the other side of the slats. You grunt back in appreciation. It's not weird. You're just bonding. The galley's chimney above you radiates a little residual heat too. Nothing dramatic, just the ghost of a fire long gone. But combined with the livestock warmth and the thick, stale air trapped in this back corner, it creates a pocket of heat that feels almost intentional. Like the ship has one final mercy to offer, and you've found it. Other pirates have their secrets too. You've watched them. Some sleep curled inside empty barrels tucked in like pickles. Others stretch out above the galley oven when it's cool enough not to burn them but warm enough to steal a nap. One old cook used to sleep under the chicken crate, insisting that the constant clucking soothed him. He got lice. But also some of the best sleep on board, so who's the real winner? You hear whispers sometimes, passed between crewmates like treasure maps. Warm spot under the bilge pipe. The corner by the gunpowder's dry tonight. If you sleep beside the second rum barrel, you can hear singing. That last one might not be a plus, depending on who's doing the singing, but still, everyone has a secret sleeping spot, a little carved-out space in this floating madhouse where they feel almost human again. Yours just happens to be next to a pig. You don't think about it too hard. Your eyes drift shut slowly. The motion of the ship has softened into a gentle rock, not unlike the cradle you probably never had. You can hear the muffled clatter of a few late shufflers topside, but they're distant now. It's you, the pig, and the lingering warmth of old stew fires and forgotten breadcrumbs. Your body starts to give in, muscles unknotting, joints softening. Your head leans against the crate, which makes a slight groaning sound but holds your weight. You've had worse pillows. Last week you used a shoe filled with straw. The sleep that comes is deep, thicker than usual, still light enough that the usual background noise of a pirate ship trickles in, snoring, muttering, the occasional hiccup, but it doesn't jolt you awake, it just lulls you deeper. A slow descent into the kind of rest that doesn't care about your enemies, your debts, your sore teeth, or that itch on your back you still can't reach. Somewhere in the middle of it you dream, not the bad kind, not ghosts or storms or the woman in the waves. You dream you're back on land. You don't know where. The colours are all wrong and the buildings keep changing shapes when you turn your head. But there's grass, real grass, soft under your feet. You lie down in a field and the sun warms your face. No wind, no cold, just light and peace. You wake with drool on your coat, a faint ache in your spine, and the sharp realization that your right leg is completely numb. You shift, groan, stretch, and catch the eye of the pig, who seems unimpressed by your presence but hasn't moved an inch. Respect. You sit there for a moment, blinking slowly. Still tired, yes, but less tired. Your bones don't creak as much. Your fingers flex without protest. Your head feels clearer, like someone wiped the grime off your thoughts. This spot worked. You'll never tell anyone. If word gets out, it's gone. Someone will steal it. 2 guys will fight over it. The pig might be replaced with a barrel of nails. You've seen it happen. One guy built himself a hammock under a rowboat tied to the deck beams. The next day, someone else cut it down and took his place. Nothing is sacred out here. Not food, not clothing, and definitely not sleep spots. So you tuck this one away. Keep it secret. Maybe write a little X under the crate in chalk. Maybe leave a crumb trail, literal or otherwise. Fringe researchers argue about this kind of thing, where pirates actually found rest, warmth, comfort. Some insist there must have been structured sleeping arrangements. Others believe the whole thing was chaos, a war of attrition between man and mildew. The truth, like most things at sea, lies somewhere in between. There was structure, sure, but it bent, it broke, it adapted. Because pirates weren't just thieves and fighters, they were survivors, and survivors find warmth wherever they can. You lean back once more, stretching your legs, listening to the soft grunt of your barnyard bunkmate. The crew shuffles in the distance, laughter and footsteps, the usual noise of barely restrained anarchy. But here, in your hidden corner, it's quiet, warm, almost still. You smile, just a little, and start to drift again. You don't realise how used to the discomfort you've become until it's suddenly missing. It's like waking up one morning and noticing that the pain in your tooth, the one that's been humming in your jaw for weeks, has simply vanished. You don't celebrate right away. You just lie there, confused, waiting for it to return. That's how you feel now, curled in your secret pig-warmed nook, wrapped in layers of salt-stiffened cloth, and strangely, not suffering. No pounding in your ears, no icy wind sneaking into your bones, no mystery smells gnawing at the back of your throat, just warmth, stillness. The occasional sleepy grunt from your livestock neighbour is almost unnerving, so of course something has to go wrong. It begins subtly, a soft shuffle of boots above, the low clunk of something heavy being moved. You blink groggily, rubbing at the corner of your eye with a knuckle, trying to stay in the haze a little longer, but the sounds keep coming. Footsteps, voices, urgency. Not panic yet, but close. You sit up slowly, disoriented, your coat slipping off your shoulders in a soft thump. The pig doesn't stir. Must be nice. You pull yourself up and out of your crevice, heart thudding with that familiar seaborne anxiety. Did I oversleep? Did I miss my shift? Did someone die while I was napping beside livestock? The answer, as usual, is kind of. There's no emergency, not yet, but there's tension. You can taste it in the air like iron. Above deck, the wind's changed. The sails are full and the crew is moving, fast, efficient, quiet in that way that means everyone's working but no one's joking. You squint into the light and spot it immediately. A ship on the horizon. Not a big one, not a warship, but not flying any flag either. which means trouble, or opportunity, or both. No one's shouting, not yet, but no one's resting now either. And just like that, the dream of warmth vanishes. Sleep is no longer an option. Your body, still sore and slightly confused from the rare rest you gave it, snaps back into sailor mode. You help where you're needed, securing lines, checking powder stores, grabbing your cutlass from its hiding place near the spare oars. You've done this enough times now that it's muscle memory. The half-asleep fog never stands a chance, but under the rhythm of preparation you feel the exhaustion creeping back in. Sleep deprivation isn't something that fixes itself with one good nap. It's cumulative, sneaky. A few good hours of rest just sharpen the contrast, remind you how bad it's been. Your body might be moving, but your mind's still skipping beats. You find yourself forgetting names, orders, even the way to the lower hold. At one point you stare at a length of rope, and for a full minute can't remember what knot you were supposed to tie. The rope just sits there limp and judgmental, you shake it off. Focus. The ship on the horizon doesn't come closer, doesn't drift away either. A stalemate, which means more waiting, which means, you guessed it, no sleep. So instead you hover in this strange purgatory-like state, half alert, half delirious, your senses sharp in the wrong places and dull in the others. You jump at shadows. You nearly fall asleep standing once. Someone says your name and you flinch like you're being accused of murder. It's not even fear that keeps you awake anymore, it's momentum. And everyone else looks just like you, ragged, jittery, teeth clenched against the unknown. You watch Mouse rub his eyes every 20 seconds, his fingers smudged with powder. Dunn keeps talking to himself, something about a goat and a hat. You think he's quoting a dream, or inventing a new religion. You're not much better. The hallucinations have started again. Not full-blown visions, but flickers. Movement at the corner of your eye, a shadow that turns into a rope, a creak that sounds exactly like someone whispering your name, over and over, until you snap and shout, "What?" into the wind. No one answers. Of course not. You're aware, somewhere in the part of your brain still functioning, that you're no longer a reliable narrator of your own reality. You're like a broken compass, ticking and twitching, maybe pointing in the right direction, maybe not. Fringe scholars who study sleep and pirate crews suggest that chronic exhaustion like this could lead to group hallucinations. Entire crews seeing things that aren't there, feeling phantom winds, hearing cries in the fog. They say it might explain some of the wildest stories in pirate lore. Ghost ships, mermaids, sea monsters. Maybe they weren't lies. Maybe they were dreams that spilled out into the daylight, shared by minds pushed too far for too long. You believe it. Right now, you'd believe anything. Eventually, as the sun dips lower, the distant ship fades from view, swallowed by the horizon or just your own watery eyes. The tension breaks. The crew exhales. Some laugh, awkward and sharp-edged. Others curse at the wasted effort. You sit, hard on the deck back against the gunwale, and realise your hands are still clenched into fists. And here it comes. The worst part. After the adrenaline fades, after the energy spikes wear off, after the false alarm, your body begs for sleep, but now you can't. Your brain's spun up, burning too hot. Every creak sounds like footsteps. Every gust of wind feels like it's delivering news. You lie down once, trying to force it, and instead lie there, vibrating with leftover nerves and exhaustion that won't cash in. You understand now, clearer than ever, how pirates could go mad. Not from violence, not from disease, but from the absence of sleep. The slow warping of reality that happens when your body gives out, but your mind keeps sprinting. The real pirate treasure? It wasn't gold, it was rest. An uninterrupted night, a warm spot, a full dream that didn't wake you with a jolt. You think about your pig-warmed hiding spot again and smile. You'll return to it soon, tonight maybe, if you're lucky, if no one's stolen it, if the ship stays quiet. You sit there until the sky goes violet and the sea cools beneath the stars. And finally, your eyes begin to close.